When Noah woke up on his graduation morning, 6 years before marrying the woman who would never love him, in his first life, he chased her so hard people called it devotion. He cooked for her, paid for everything, apologized first, waited last, and smiled whenever she gave him the smallest bit of attention. Her name was Audrey. Sterling, the first time he lived this day, he gave Audrey a confession necklace. In front of their whole class, everyone clapped as she smiled for the cameras. He thought that smile meant he had finally been chosen. He spent the next 6 years paying for that mistake. By the end of their marriage, he was a husband on paper and a servant in every way that mattered. Audrey had his loyalty, his money, his future, and the ugliest part was that he kept handing her more. So, when he opened his eyes at 18 again and saw that same velvet box on his desk, Noah knew exactly where his old life had started, and this is where things get satisfying. He did something his old self would have begged him to undo, sealing that necklace in a buyback envelope, sent it away, and opened his college admissions portal. The first time he chose Audrey's school and called it love. This time he chose the one route she had not already claimed, and that was the moment Audrey Sterling realized her most loyal shadow was about to walk out of her life. He had not magically applied to a new college that morning. Noah was desperate, not a wizard. He already had two valid offers. Alderest University was the route everyone expected, the polished road beside Audrey, the one where he had already placed a deposit. Because the boy he used to be thought staying close was the same as being chosen, Briar Coast University had accepted him into the scent design and botanical materials program with aid, still open through graduation week. The first life had taught him one useful thing before it finished grinding him into decorative dust. If a door exists, do not spend 6 years asking the wrong person for permission to use it. Noah did not click yet. He wanted the final transcript sent correctly and wanted a witness who understood school forms better than his adrenaline did. So he went to Ridgeview High School with no necklace, 2 choices on his phone, and a heart that still had the audacity to speed up when Audrey's name appeared on his screen. Her message was short: bring the roses and charger too. Do not be late for the photo wall. No question mark, no. Please, just the schedule of a girl who had never needed to wonder whether he would be useful. That was Audrey's gift and flaw. She rarely shouted because the world usually bent before volume became necessary. She simply stated that the paperwork had already been filed. The front of Ridgeview High School looked like the entire senior class had been attacked by silver balloons. Parents crowded the entrance, while teachers pointed people toward the graduation staging area. Classmates kept yelling names, hoping volume could make the future less terrifying. And near the senior send-off photo wall, Audrey stood beside the taped pear mark where everyone expected Noah to stand. She looked perfect in that polished, controlled way that had once rearranged his entire nervous system. Noah noticed, and he hated that he noticed. Then he kept walking. Audrey held out her hand without looking away from the camera setup, asking for roses. He placed the white roses on the shared birthday table instead of handing them directly to her. Right there on the table, her eyes snapped to him, then calling out his name. His voice sounded smooth and exact, like a hand closing around a familiar handle. He took the charger from his pocket, placing it in her palm. And this is yours. She looked at the charger, then the flowers, then back at him, asking why he was acting like this today. The past version of him had spent 6 years trying to earn a place in her heart, but mostly became background hallway lighting. Pretty brutal, if you ask me. Years of silence had taught him how easy it was to disappear while standing right beside her. If he stood on that taped mark, smiled at the camera, and waited for Darius Bell to shove a microphone near his face, he knew exactly which road would open. He told her he was making the day accurate. Audrey's expression tightened, telling him not to make it awkward. That was almost funny, more like finding a warning label at the bottom of a cliff after falling down. The student media editor crouched near the tripod, trying to adjust the angle. While other classmates kept stepping over her cables, she was the one who had been organizing half the livestream setup since morning, quiet and efficient, showing the exhausted patience of someone trusted by adults but ignored by teenagers. The taped mark beside Audrey had Noah's name written on a little card. Not officially, of course. Nothing about Audrey and him was official in this life. That was the trick. Everyone just acted like his spot beside her was signed by gravity. He peeled the card off the floor. Audrey's hand caught his sleeve, asking what he was doing. He turned to the student media editor, holding out The card, since she needed a clear angle, he told her to stand there. The editor blinked, asking if he was sure. Absolutely, Noah replied as Darius appeared behind the photo wall with a wireless microphone, looking like a man who personally invested in other people's bad decisions, jokingly asking why. Their romantic lead was leaving. Noah replied that he retired before the finale. Classic bad pacing, he thought, almost laughing. That was Darius. If a building was on fire, he would call it an immersive lighting choice until the smoke reached his shoes. He was warm, loyal, and right now, dangerously convinced he was helping. The editor stepped into his spot. The camera flashed for one small, incredibly satisfying second. Audrey stood beside the empty shape of an expectation. Noah did not humiliate her, nor did he pull another girl close. He did not perform some new romance to punish her. He simply refused to occupy the place everyone had saved for him. The silence after the flash was better than applause. Audrey's voice dropped, warning him it was enough, but he disagreed. He left before old habits could make him ask if she needed anything else. The guidance office smelled like paper, cheap coffee, and adults pretending the day was organized. The counselor looked relieved when Noah shut the door behind him, probably because he was not crying, shouting, or asking if his cap made his head look tragic. He announced he needed to update his final enrollment. She glanced at the clock, verifying today. Darius slipped in behind him before the door could close. She supported dramatic entrances. She teased but needed a category. Was this nerves, sudden rebellion, or a total identity arc? Enrollment, he replied, his smile thinning. That sounded pretty expensive. It already was. The counselor waited, and that was the first mercy of the morning. No speech. No lecture, just a chair, a desk, and enough silence for him to prove he had not confusing panic with planning. He opened the Alderest University portal first. The withdrawal screen looked too clean for something that had ruined his entire life once. One button, one warning about the deposit, one final confirmation. Everything forfeited. His thumb hovered, picturing Audrey in the first timeline walking ahead of him on Alderest paths, while people treated them like a matched set. He remembered the marriage that followed, and how gratitude, love, and duty had slowly fused into one ugly knot. He heard every time he had called fear loyalty, because loyalty sounded less pathetic. Then he tapped confirm. The screen changed, not enrolled. His chest hurt in a way that almost felt like air. He opened Briar Coast University's portal next, accepting the scent design and botanical materials program, existing aid, summer start, campus housing available. The words were boring enough to be beautiful. The counselor leaned closer only after both confirmations were on screen. You understand, the final transcript goes to Briar Coast now. Yes, and this is your decision. Mine. That word hit harder than it should have. Mine, not Audrey's, not Edwin Sterling's, not the class's, not the version of him who had treated being needed like rent. Darius stopped joking. Noah, he said softer now, does Audrey no, she knows I moved from the tape. That is not the same as changing your entire college route. It is the same direction. Darius dragged both hands over his face. Okay, small scheduling issue. I may have prepared a senior live stream segment. Noah gave him the look that question deserved. He looked at the ceiling like the ceiling had done this. Birthday spotlight, couple nostalgia. Maybe a little confession runway. A confession runway, in my defense. Everyone thought you wanted it. That landed because it was true. He had wanted it. The first version of him had wanted it so badly that he built his whole personality around being convenient to love. But consent was not a group project, and Darius had always been too good at turning feelings into programming. Delete it, Noah said. He winced. We're already live pieces. The graduation feed is queued. He can cut the graphics, but there is still a microphone handoff after the senior messages. The old road opened again. Polished and waiting, he could hide. He could let the segment disappear quietly. He could leave Audrey with confusion instead of truth and pretend avoidance was strength, but the first life had been built out of quiet little evasions. He had swallowed his own choices one at a time until there was nothing left to call a self. Give me the microphone, Noah said. Darius stared. For non-confession, for an announcement that is either mature or deeply terrifying. Both can be true. Darius nodded once. I deserve that. The graduation staging area buzzed with the specific chaos of people who had been told to line up and immediately forgot what a line was. Teachers waved clipboards. Parents drifted near the ropes. The student media editor stood behind the camera, checking levels. Darius moved like a showman who had lost control of his own show and was trying to make that look intentional. Audrey was near the front, still holding her charger, when she saw Darius angle the microphone toward him. Her face stilled. The class noticed too. That was the problem with years of predictable devotion. The moment Noah stepped toward a microphone on graduation day, half the crowd turns into a romance audience. Someone whistles. Someone mutters finally. His stomach turns, but not from fear of speaking. A sick feeling hits. The old timeline slides over the room. Like a transparent film. Same age, same stage, same girl watching. She has that same unreadable composure. He rubs his bare ring finger. He stops, just as Darius covers the microphone with his hand. He whispers to not ruin his segment, reminding him his turn is coming. He takes the mic and faces the camera, knowing looking at Audrey is dangerous. If he looks too long, some loyal part of him might start bleeding in public. He speaks, thanking Ridgeview High School. His voice sounds steadier than he feels. He thanks Harbor House Children's Center, admitting he wouldn't be standing here otherwise. They generously gave him a safe place to grow up before he even knew what to do. The teasing quieted down. Everyone expected him to attend Alderest University. Audrey's posture shifts by 1 inch. With her, that single inch is a massive statement. But he is not going. He announces that he withdrew from Alderest this morning. He chose Briarcoast's botanical program instead. Complete silence hits the room, then Darius starts clapping. The student media editor quickly joins in next. A few classmates follow, then more. The room does not quite explode. Nobody carries him out on their shoulders. It is not that kind of story yet. Yet the applause points to a brand new future, without Audrey's name on it. That is enough for him. He lowers the microphone before anyone can ask. He clarifies it was just an announcement, not a confession, drawing a quick laugh. Darius groans nearby like his ratings were murdered. Audrey does not clap at all, waiting silently until he hands the microphone back. He steps backstage, and she immediately follows him out. Her heels click sharply as she carries the charger like incriminating evidence. She demands to know what that was, and he calmly replies it was his decision. She asks why he did it like that. He says everyone expected a reveal. Her jaw tightens. She accuses him of embarrassment. Of course, her first concern isn't why he is leaving, but the public embarrassment. He wishes he could be colder, to look at her and feel clean victory. Instead, Audrey looks furious in that familiar way that used to control him. And yet, his traitorous heart still notices the familiar shine in her eyes. Before his brain can even complain, he hates himself for still caring. He tells her he didn't embarrass her, finally choosing to stop lying. She reminds him how he stood by her and handled every single birthday. He had committed to Alderest, supported by her grandfather's wealth for years. Making this decision in public makes the corridor feel suddenly tight with shame. It is true that Edwin Sterling had supported him all this time. Sterling House provided him stability, a nice room, and a polished life. But they never let him forget those 1,000 tiny advantages for long. Gratitude was his first heavy chain, mostly because it looked so much like decency. He forces a calm tone, stating Edwin helped him when he truly needed it. But that doesn't make his entire life a family asset. Audrey's eyes flash. No one said it out loud, everyone just acted it out. She took a step closer, asking if this was because he did not react right that morning. That morning he laughed once, a sound so bitter that he quickly stopped. Audrey. He had spent years being the person who remembered everything she ever liked, where she stood when her phone died, what flowers looked best in her photos, and which future made her grandfather proud. He worked to be useful until that usefulness became his whole self. Her expression shifted, but he could not read her mind. Done translating her silence into generous excuses, he told her he was not punishing her, he was simply leaving her orbit. All day he had seen anger, but now uncertainty slipped in, then her posture hardened, hiding honesty. Feelings vanished. She snapped that he could not build a life in 10 days just because a camera applauded. No, he countered, he builds it by making his own choices. His phone buzzed, showing the buyback confirmation on the screen. The expensive necklace had passed that first review. A partial refund would be released after final inspection. It was not movie money. It was not enough for a dramatic transformation. Montage, just a few practical steps and one very satisfying receipt. He showed her only the top line. The necklace was gone. Audrey stared at the screen. If she had expected him to feel pain, he did. The gift had been beautiful and he had been stupid to buy it, but he had also been sincere. and he hated burying that version of himself. But honestly, who wouldn't refuse to be buried? With his past, Darius appeared at the end of the corridor, finally silent for once. The student media editor stood just a few feet behind him, with her camera lowered. She apologized softly, saying she was not trying to eavesdrop. Nobody in this hallway was currently succeeding at privacy, Darius muttered. Audrey looked at the editor and he felt the old familiar script trying to write a new scene. Jealousy. Misunderstandings, using feelings like a weapon, easy drama. And cheap, easy damage. He stepped slightly away from the editor before Audrey could turn her into the target. The editor swallowed, wanting to say congratulations, adding that she thought he was brave. Thank you, he said. She held the camera strap with both hands, since this was apparently the day for saying things before people leave. She admitted she liked him for 2 years. He did not have to do anything with that, only wanting him to know someone saw him. The sentence hit a place in him that Audrey's attention had never reached cleanly. Not because he loved the editor. He did not. That would have been completely unfair to both of them, and he was trying hard to stop turning other people into proof. But for 6 years in his head, he had let Audrey's cold distance grade his entire worth. One quiet girl with a camera had just handed back a point the universe had taken away. Without authority, he said he was honored because jokes would have been cowardice. There, and he was not in a place where he could turn that into anything honest. She nodded as if she expected that, saying she hated watching everyone act like he was furniture. Darius whispered, support furniture. Retired, he asked. The editor smiled a little and backed away, giving him exactly what almost no one had given him that morning, actual room. Darius came closer. After she left, his voice losing all its usual theatrical glitter. Is he moving too fast? He had spent years moving too slow. Darius heard enough weight in that to stop. Ignoring her, he opened the message about the trial shift he requested before. Leaving Sterling House, they had an opening the next morning for a short shift. It was a temporary schedule, enough to earn money independent of any family ledger. He accepted it, then immediately booked his one-way ticket to Briar Coast. With 10 days until the summer move-in date, the number felt clean. Audrey watched his screen, asking if he was really doing this. Yes, he was. She asked where he would stay until then. At Sterling House in the guest suite, he replied. He promised to be polite and avoid any scenes. In 10 days, he would be gone. Her lips tightened as she asked if practical problems would change his mind. That was the final hook in her voice, not love, not an apology. Only practicality, the old machine trying to restart. He put his phone away. He pocketed it before she could treat his final decisions like a debate. They might make things harder, he said, but they had no vote. Darius exhaled heavily. He had been holding his breath down the entire hallway. Audrey looked past him. She stared toward the noisy graduation crowd where their classmates laughed. They clapped and posed, pretending his speech had not shattered their world. When she looked back, he could not guess her plan, but he knew that look. She was not done pushing, and he had no idea what she would do next. He did not know how hard Sterling House would pull before he left forever. He only knew the necklace was gone, all the rest was gone, and his future was set. With a departure date, his old life finally stopped chasing him. It was over. Only 10 days remained before his escape. By breakfast, his shift finally started. He had a single key on his ring, and Audrey Sterling standing at his counter. She acted like he missed a meeting, but this counter belonged to Juniper Cup. It belonged to the cafe, not her, which was a beautiful little detail. Paper cups were stacked by his elbow, alongside a tip jar containing some loose cash. Best of all, his manager cared 0% about his dramatic high school breakup. Noah cared slightly more than 0%, being only human after all. His manager handed him an apron and pointed directly at the cash register. He told Noah to smile if possible, or just be accurate if he could not. Noah promised accuracy, and the manager agreed it meant far fewer refunds. It was the first philosophy in years that did not demand fake gratitude or depend on Audrey's tight calendar. It was almost a spiritual relief. The media editor was already behind the counter, tying her apron. At graduation, she looked like a quiet camera ghost under harsh cafe lights. She looked like she had only slept 4 hours but still knew everything. When she spotted Noah, she offered him a very small, careful smile. She was surprised he actually came, but he loved proving people wrong early. Mainly Audrey and himself. She nodded knowingly and made room for him. That was their entire conversation. They left all of yesterday's raw tension exactly where it belonged, choosing instead to focus on their work. Asking strangers for their drink sizes was the healthy progress he needed. Even if that progress wore an apron, he immediately spilled hot milk everywhere. He struggled with the lids, quickly learning how dramatic coffee drinkers could be. They turned into philosophers over syrup pumps, but his tips kept growing. Into the jar, his name went on the timesheet. The money was small and it belonged to him without any family ledger, whispering to remember who gave it. To him, honest labor had one underrated feature. When the shift ended, the job stopped pretending it loved him. Darius Bell arrived near lunch with sunglasses on his head and the cautious expression of a man approaching a stage after the lighting rig had fallen. He announced he was there as a respectful, non-matchmaking customer. The student media editor looked at him, asking if he wanted coffee. Darius wanted absolution but started with coffee. Noah asked him what size. Darius pressed a hand to his chest, teasing him about his boundaries and retail voice. Character development with a name tag, Darius teased, choosing medium because he was emotionally large already. Noah made his drink badly enough that he took a sip and stared into the cup like it had revealed a minor personal betrayal. He still put $2 in the tip jar. That was friendship, questionable taste, but friendship. Then the door opened again. Audrey Sterling entered Juniper Cup. Cream blouse, polished shoes, and the kind of stillness that made ordinary rooms feel like they had accidentally become interview panels. She should not have looked out of place. Rich people bought coffee too, but Audrey did not enter like a customer. She entered like she had finally located an employee who had wandered out of the estate. Noah's body reacted before his dignity could file a report. Shoulders straight, breath controlled, bare ring finger rubbing once against his thumb under the counter. Then he stopped and said good afternoon, with the same voice he had used for a woman who had argued with him about foam. Asking what he could get started, Audrey looked at the menu for half a second. Then back at him, the usual talk about 6 years of marriage wrapped in 2 words. The whole old arrangement had lived inside phrases like that. The usual meant he remembered. The usual meant she did not have to ask. The usual meant his attention was not a gift, it was infrastructure. He kept his hand on the register, asking what size and sweetness. Her expression did not change much. Audrey had been raised around money, boardrooms, and people pretending. Discomfort was a scheduling issue, but he saw the pause. She told him he knew it. He replied he knew a lot of things. She demanded he make it. Behind her, the line shifted. The student media editor stopped wiping the counter. Darius became so still Noah almost checked him for a pulse. He smiled politely, feeling it illegal. He could make a drink from memory or take an order from a customer. Today, he was doing the second one. Audrey's gaze sharpened, calling his attitude completely unnecessary. She folded her arms. When Noah offered her a minute to decide, she remained silent, so he looked past her to the man behind her, announcing he could help whoever was ready. A tiny gasp from near the pastry case fed a petty part of him he was not proud of, but he was also not ashamed enough to pretend it did not happen. History has survived on smaller acts of rebellion than making a wealthy girl say her coffee order out loud. The next customer stepped around Audrey with the terror of someone walking through a museum alarm beam. Noah took his order, made it accurately, and handed it over. He tipped $1 like he was paying hazard insurance. Audrey's mouth pressed into a line. His coworker stepped closer, offering in a soft voice to take her order. Audrey looked down at her apron, then back at her face. Then reality bit down hard. His innocent coworker was now Audrey's target. Yet Audrey spotted her near the photo wall, simply speaking her mind. She didn't demand anything in return. Audrey sneered, of course, the new routine. The atmosphere turned ice cold. His coworker briefly looked down, trying to process it. She looked up again, quietly stating that she only worked there. Audrey coolly replied that was apparently the appeal. The quiet tone made it worse. Her cruelty always wore velvet gloves. The sharp words slid across the counter. They were polished enough for the public, yet sharp enough to cut her victim. A sharp sting of shame hit him first, a bitter reflex that still believed that service work was somehow a failure if the wrong person sneered. But then a cleaner anger took over. He grabbed the cup Audrey hadn't ordered. He popped the register open and processed a refund for her bottled water. She had grabbed it without looking. He told her she was refunded. Audrey blinked, stunned, as he flatly told her she was leaving. The manager looked up, his coworker froze, and Darius whispered that drama had arrived. Darius immediately looked like he deeply regretted opening his mouth at all. Audrey's voice dropped, demanding if he was actually throwing her out. He answered yes for insulting another employee. She repeated the words. She made the phrase sound foreign. He kept his eyes locked on hers. She had made things personal, but he kept his boundaries strictly professional. A clean line didn't need a massive dramatic scene, it just needed a door. Audrey glared at his coworker. For a second, his old habits tempted him. He could have easily stepped closer to his coworker to spark some jealousy. Playing the victim would have hurt Audrey publicly, simple, satisfying damage. But he refused. He told her she wasn't a rebound, she was his coworker. She deserved basic respect, regardless of their past. His coworker quietly exhaled. Darius stopped whispering. Audrey's expression shifted, but it was hard to read. He was done trying to guess what her silence actually meant. The manager dried her hands on a towel and stood firmly beside him. She told Audrey they could serve her another day, but definitely not today. That support meant everything. For once, someone ignored Audrey's famous last name. They remembered the door existed. Audrey grabbed her bag and walked out. At the exit, she turned back, asking if he enjoyed doing this. An ugly part of him loved having a clear counter between them. Standing on the side with control, instead, he chose absolute honesty. He simply said he enjoyed not pretending. Audrey left, and everyone exhaled. Darius leaned over the pickup counter, pointing with his hot coffee cup. He joked that his customer service era was honestly terrifying. Calling it a betrayal, he told him to drink up, making his coworker laugh. She gently touched the counter and softly thanked him for stepping up. She shouldn't have been dragged into this, but that was enough. To be her hero, he just wanted to stop letting Audrey pull innocent bystanders into their toxic disaster. After his shift, he checked his tip jar. Then he opened his phone. The necklace refund had finally cleared. The amount was small, practical, and exactly what he needed. To make his next step feel less fragile, just then Edwin Sterling called. Noah stood outside Juniper Cup with his apron folded under one arm, watching Audrey's name. Failed to appear on the screen. Edwin did. That mattered. The boy Noah used to be. Would have answered like he was being called to the principal's office by a family that technically was not his own, yet still somehow held massive authority over him. But he answered like an adult, shaky but grown up. Noah, Edwin said. The older man's voice was measured, complete, and impossible to rush. Audrey had told him Noah changed his enrollment. He had, accepting Briar Coast University instead. Edwin asked if both offers were still valid when he made that choice, that question. Surprised Noah it was fair. Yes, he answered. All the rest was paid for but Briar Coast sent design and botanical materials program, still had financial aid, and summer housing open. He withdrew from Alderest and accepted Briar Coast himself. The guidance counselor only had to confirm his transcript's final destination. When asked about travel booked on the household account, Noah said no. There was a pause. Traffic rushed past the sidewalk. Inside the coffee shop, Darius hovered, pretending not to watch him with the subtlety of a loud marching band. Then Edwin spoke. He had expected Noah to stay close to Audrey. The words were not cruel, making them heavy. Noah knew he should have said it plainly from the start, because unspoken expectations still create massive pressure when everyone acts on them. His throat tightened painfully. Edwin continued, explaining that his placement at Sterling House was just a host arrangement. Coordinated after Harbor House, it was support, not adoption, employment, or a claim on his adulthood. Noah closed his eyes as the realization hit. There were no fireworks, only a sidewalk, a folded apron, and a 72-year-old man finally pointing out the door that had always been there. Thank you, Noah said. Edwin offered to send that in writing. Noah replied he did not have to, but Edwin insisted. He had allowed help to become a fog, which benefits the family house more than the young person trying to leave it. That sounded exactly like Edwin. Institutional guilt, wearing a tie. Edwin refused to fund the move unless asked. He would not ask Noah to stay, but only requested that he leave safely and inform the staff what keys he was returning. Noah agreed. He could do that. Gratitude was not a tenancy agreement for his future. Noah looked down at his bare hand. For once, his ring finger stayed bare and still. The signed letter arrived in his email 15 minutes later. It was short, clear, and almost painfully formal. He owed them no service, romance, or future residence. The host arrangement had ended with his graduation. Any continued stay before his departure was now temporary guest accommodation only. Noah read it twice, then sent Edwin a single line in response, thanking him for putting the door where he could see it. he did not know. If Edwin fully understood the meaning, but he did not need to. That evening, Noah returned to Sterling House with his wages in his account, the necklace refund, pending transfer, and the strangest feeling in his chest. Freedom was still too big. A word for someone still carrying a house key, but that key was now just an object instead of a leash. Audrey was in the front hall when he came in. Of course she was. She had changed her clothes, but not her posture. Still polished, still perfectly controlled. The girl his past life had chased so hard that he mistook proximity for proof. My grandfather called you, she told him. He did. She asked Edwin for a letter, and Edwin offered one. Her eyes moved to his folded apron. The job was real, too. Surely he did not prefer getting ordered around by strangers. He almost smiled. Your argument has a mirror problem, he told her. Her face tightened. He walked to the entry table, sliding his key off with a soft scrape. The household account card followed right after. That card paid for his groceries, tuition, and formal clothes for dinners he never wanted to attend. Endless expenses had trained him to feel like a borrowed guest. He placed both on the table. Audrey stared, demanding what he was doing. Returning access, he replied. She reminded him he still had the guest room. But as a temporary guest, he refused to touch the account or use their car. He would not let the house absorb the weight of his decisions, while he pretended otherwise. She called it dramatic, but he disagreed. The microphone incident was dramatic, he countered. This was just inventory. She called him petty, but he stood by it. He went upstairs to pack his belongings, clothes he chose, notebooks, some items from Harbor House, and a cedar toy he kept longer than any grown man should admit. He left everything else behind. Everything bought for family events that never felt like his. Audrey followed him to the guest room doorway but stayed outside. That mattered. It fixed nothing, but he noticed. She claimed everything he had came through this house. Her words hit exactly where she aimed. The comfortable room, the school, the polished address, and quiet safety. After years of shared group bedrooms and donated coats, she was not lying about the history. She was weaponizing the receipt. He folded a shirt slowly. Keeping his hands busy kept his voice steady. A lot did come through this house, he agreed. Help did, stability did, and opportunities did. Why act trapped, she asked. He faced her, ready for the clash. Because nobody had to lock the door if leaving made him feel ungrateful. She went quiet. He took his travel envelope, sliding the release letter from Edwin inside and zipping the bag. Gratitude does not make him an employee, he said. It does not make him a permanent dependent, and it certainly does not make him her future husband. Those final words changed the entire room. Audrey had no way of knowing about the quiet marriage in his mind, the silent dinners, the missed calls, or the cold bedrooms driving those words. To her, it probably sounded like an unjust accusation against an unnamed future. To him, it was drawing a line in the sand. She quietly spoke his name, Noah. He waited a second, hoping she might finally say something real instead of presenting another polished schedule involving Edwin, the family estate, rankings, and public optics. Instead, she whispered that Briar Coast was far. He nodded, calling that one of its best features. Her mouth pressed thin. He did not bother filling the silence. The remaining days turned into a countdown instead of a debate. He worked whatever brief shifts his manager offered, keeping the student media editor strictly as a coworker, rather than his emotional insurance policy. She asked about Briar Coast once, wished him luck, and never tried to make his departure about herself. Such simple restraint should not have felt rare, but his standards had recently crawled out from rock bottom. Darius dropped by twice under the banner of anti-ambush friendship. During his first visit, he brought coffee from the shop where Noah worked, which Noah jokingly called either deep loyalty or a clear medical emergency condition. The second time, he apologized without joke cracking for building a confession segment around a yes she had never given him. She only thought she was helping, he told her. He knew that was no defense. No, she countered, it is just why she was not throwing his entire personality into traffic. He accepted this. He had the solemn dignity of a man spared from metaphorical vehicular disaster. Her money stacked up slowly. Wages, tips, and a necklace refund. She was far from rich, but could buy what she needed without that household card pulsing in her pocket like a tiny guilty heart. She confirmed campus housing, double-checked her travel plans, and sent the final arrival details to Briar Coast. She scheduled Harbor House as her final stop. Before her shuttle left Fairmont, Audrey stopped giving direct orders after the key was returned, but that did not mean the pressure stopped. She loomed in doorways as she carried heavy boxes, asking if she had checked. The cold weather in Portlark, she even brought up Alderest rankings like a list. Could hold her hand at night, she offered help with the luggage then. Looked away when she said she had 2 strong arms and a ticket. Every offer sounded almost reasonable. That was the danger. Audrey was a master at making ownership. Looked like simple efficiency. On her final night at Sterling House, she stood in the guest suite, bags waiting by the door, the key officially gone from her pocket. The room looked less like a home than ever before, a painful, honest truth. Downstairs, Audrey remained quiet. Edwin's letter rested in her travel envelope. Her phone displayed the route, the timeline, her housing details, and the address of the orphanage that raised her long before Audrey's family ever knew her name. Just one day left, no fancy Sterling family resources needed anymore. That should have felt liberating. Instead, it made her feel incredibly exposed, as every borrowed thing fell away. She had to discover if a real person existed beneath all that utility, or just an empty hangar where Audrey's rigid schedule used to hang. She set her alarm for Harbor House Children's Center. If Sterling House was the place she was merely allowed to stay, Harbor House was where she learned how to leave a room and still be wanted back. She returned to Harbor House to say her goodbyes. Then, a terrified 10-year-old accidentally showed her future mentor exactly what she was good at. That sentence feels too polished now, like life had arranged a perfect demonstration with emotional lighting. Back then, she was just an 18-year-old with 2 bags, a paid ticket, and enough chest-tightening panic to make every single hallway look like a test. Harbor House Children's Center still sat in Fairmont with that familiar, practical stubbornness she remembered so well. Nothing about it was glamorous. The faded side entrance paint was touched up in a shade that barely matched the donation. Shelves were roughly labeled with tape, and the ancient office printer still squealed as if personally insulted by paper. She loved this messy place more than any luxury mansion. The Harbor House director met her right at the front door, hands already busy with work. She pointed immediately toward the supply table, warning her against any grand, dramatic gestures. "Turn around and take them back," she said. "Well, good morning to you, too." "Show me the damage," the director demanded. She lifted her heavy bags, delivering exactly what was asked. She checked like a customs officer looking for self-sacrifice. Cotton squares, unscented. Soap, simple notebooks, markers, spare chargers, and some much-needed grocery gift cards. Noah paid the exact amount she had approved, using his own wages and the necklace refund. He kept Sterling House out of it, resisting his usual urge to donate every last penny. Down to the lint, she narrowed her eyes, asking if he kept enough for the move. He said yes. She reminded him that enough meant food too, which he promised he had covered. He asked if he looked afraid of laundry. She countered that he would skip meals for a kid's socks. And then call it budgeting. That was pretty unfair, mostly because she was entirely right. Noah held up both hands, insisting he kept enough. She studied him for another quiet second. She accepted the bags, warning that care leaving him empty just makes others clean up later. He had no joke ready for that, which was exactly how he knew she had landed a clean hit. A direct hit. The care center was busy in its usual, uneven way. Care places were always busy. A young volunteer carried snack boxes down the hallway. A child argued with a cabinet door. Someone laughed loudly in the common room. Then someone else immediately yelled that the laughter was way too loud. The place was never quiet, but it had rules Noah understood. If a door closed, you knocked. If a child said no to a hug, you believed them. If someone donated, the center decided. They decided if it actually helped. Choice lived there, plain and simple. Long before he had the words for it, Noah put his bags in the director's office. His scheduled Briar Coast welcome call started in 15 minutes. He had almost canceled it. A special kind of fear arrives when an escape becomes real enough to judge you. Running from Audrey was one thing, but joining a program with real experts, that was terrifying. He was about to face people who actually knew what they were doing. The director saw Noah staring at his laptop like it might bite him. She reminded him he wanted this, but wanting something and letting experts see it are different. "Sit down," she commanded. Her authority was warm, plain, and useful. Noah sat. The welcome call opened with a small grid of admitted students. And there was one woman whose face could make a room stand straighter through a screen. Dr. Kessler looked practical, which was far worse than looking theatrical. Theatrical people could be flattered, but practical people asked hard questions. Like asking where the fire exit was. "Each of you will choose a sensory memory," she said. Something that shaped how you solve problems, not your favorite or most expensive memory. Just a useful one. That was her entire introduction, direct and to the point. Dr. Kessler had apparently looked at education and decided style was a contaminant. Noah respected her immediately, but he feared her like an unexpected tax audit. When his turn came, he pulled a worn cedar toy out of his bag. It was small enough to fit in his palm, with edges rubbed smooth. Harbor House kept a whole bin of things like this for kids facing sudden change. He held it up to the camera, explaining it was originally from the center. Just a block of cedar, carrying a little dust no one would admit to. It worked because it was not exciting or loud, it was just stable. When everything else felt loud or new, they knew this toy would behave. Dr. Kessler leaned closer, noting that choice clearly mattered more to him than novelty. Usually Noah replied, "Novelty is just what adults call a surprise after signing the forms." The corner of her mouth twitched. He counted that tiny smirk as a major victory. Just like that, the hallway outside the office erupts with adult voices. It was a burst of laughter from donors arriving early for a pickup. Rustling gift bags and a heavy wave of perfume roll right under the office door. It smells like a weaponized department store, and then a child's voice cuts through. "Stop, stop." Hearing that, he freezes, his entire focus instantly narrowing. The director tries to move, but she is completely swamped with other chaotic demands. Through the window, he spots a 10-year-old boy pressed against the hallway wall. His hands are clamped over his ears, breathing heavily, eyes locked onto the scene. The highly scented gift bags sit nearby, while oblivious adults chat right above him. On the laptop screen, Dr. Kessler is waiting, but Noah tells her he needs a minute. He does not ask for permission, completely skipping the end of his official evaluation. He sets down a cedar toy, then snatches it back, gut instinct guiding him. Out in the hall, 3 adults try to help by loudly calling the child's name. It is not working, mostly because absolutely no one thinks to lower their voice. The director catches his eye. Noah has absolutely no official authority in this place. He only has his graduate degree, this room, and a deep understanding of sensory overload. He recognizes that terrified look, the overwhelm of a kid trapped in suffocating chaos. Everyone expects the child to be grateful, but Noah steps in, asking to clear the bench. The director gives him a quick nod of approval, and that is all he needs. Noah sweeps the heavily scented gift bags into a side room and shuts the door tight. He cracks the window open 3 inches. Fresh air is a lifesaver when you are suffocating. A young volunteer begins to babble out apologies, but Noah quickly cuts her off. He raises a steady hand and gently tells her they need total silence first. The adults finally shut up. Noah slowly crouches a few feet from the child. He leaves the exit open, not reaching out. His own heart pounds, but he stays calm. He tells the boy in a soft voice that he does not have to answer. Noah places 3 items on the floor, a clean cotton cloth, an orange peel, and the toy. They are clean, simple, and safe. At first, the child does not even flinch. His breathing is still incredibly shallow, his panicked eyes darting around the hallway. Noah gently slides the items slightly farther away, giving the boy some breathing room. "There is no wrong choice," he whispers. Slowly, the boy reaches for the cedar. Noah immediately looks away, giving him some much-needed privacy. That quiet dignity is crucial. Usually, onlookers treat a breakdown like a public show, staring with intense curiosity. But not here. The child tightly presses the warm cedar wood between his palms. He takes a slow, deep breath, his tense shoulders finally starting to relax. The director leads the adults away, and the volunteer silently clears the remaining bags. That quiet, helpful initiative is far better than any speech an adult could give. When the child is finally calm enough to speak, he whispers a soft observation. "This toy is old," he says. "Old things know how to mind their own business." A tiny smile flickers across the boy's face. The director gently taps Noah's shoulder. She gestures back to the office, reminding him that his video call is still active. Noah's stomach drops instantly as he walks back to his laptop, bracing for rejection. He expects a lecture about his professionalism or a polite, academic rejection letter. Instead, Dr. Kessler stares back at him with a completely unreadable, neutral expression. "Explain every single choice you just made," she commands with absolute gravity. He respects her direct tone, so he begins to lay out his reasoning. He removed the heavy scent first, because that sensory trigger was easiest to fix. Telling someone to calm down while walking away is nothing but cheap theater. He offered 3 options. Having too many choices only becomes another heavy demand. Cotton offered neutrality, orange was bright but familiar, and cedar felt perfectly stable. The center used similar items. He held back, refusing to hand them over directly. Any physical contact would make him part of the problem. Dr. Kessler stayed silent. Her lack of interruption made him far more nervous than a sudden cutoff. "Why did you stop your evaluation?" she asked, before his polished response could form. He admitted that a child mattered more than looking prepared. The director near the door let out a soft sound. It was not quite approval, nor was it grief. Dr. Kessler looked down. She wrote a quick note, then stared back. He was untrained but painfully aware. His presence was no accident. Honestly, getting validated by a legend like her is terrifying. Praise from Audrey always felt like distant sunlight through glass, warm but unreachable. It was impossible to touch, but this felt different, a real professional validation. She was looking at his choices and calling them real. Use the safe office materials. Dr. Kessler ordered him to make a rough card for a door opening after rain. No performance, only 2 minutes. His pulse began to race wildly. The director pointed to a nearby tray holding paper strips, cotton, and orange. Cedar, craft pencil shavings, and a cup of water sat there, nothing fancy. He refused to make it fancy. Still, he wanted to make struggle look elegant. He had to keep it simple. He dampened a paper strip near the window. He did not soak it, just caught the damp mineral scent of rain on concrete. He touched cotton to the edge to keep the initial scent clean and pure. It would feel inviting, not empty. He crushed a tiny piece of orange peel. Pressing it to the paper, he placed cedar shavings right in the center. It smelled dry and warm, like entering a quiet room that demanded absolutely nothing. A door opening after rain, holding it near the laptop, he knew he succeeded. The creation was rough, simple, and entirely his, moving from outside to inside. It brought control over noise, a safe entry. Dr. Kessler asked what it meant. He explained it was for someone wanting to enter, but needing proof they could leave. Those words left him surprisingly quiet. Dr. Kessler studied him with intense focus. She told him to report to the Kessler Sensory Lab, once in Port Lark. He would need standard safety training first. She offered a paid summer fellowship. It was conditional under supervision. He had to learn procedure first. He could not touch anything important yet. His mind locked onto the word paid. The prospect of fellowship and supervision felt overwhelming to his guarded heart. He pointed out they had never met in person. She simply countered his doubt. She saw him abandon an evaluation for the right reasons, managing variables beautifully. He never tried to be a hero, treating design as consent. That was enough. It was not enough to skip training, though. He swallowed hard under her gaze. The director seemed to dare him to shrink. He offered a plain thank you. Dr. Kessler warned him not to get dramatic and told him to arrive on time. The call ended 5 minutes later. He stared blankly at the empty screen. His future shifted from a quick escape to a real invitation. Everything felt different. The director sat across from him, noting he definitely needed the paid supervision. Noah looked across at the chair. Paid, yes. Supervised, very good. He needed both. He heard a trace of support in her voice. He just refused to soften it. They had enough cheap, donated frosting in the building to seal a driveway. He actually laughed. For the first time since graduation morning, his chest felt clear. Usually laughing felt like air escaping a fresh wound. Then Audrey walked in. She came right through the front entrance, halting the second she saw him. Her eyes swept over his bags, his laptop, the director in the doorway. She stared at the cedar toy on the desk, calculating everything instantly. Fast, sharp, and controlled, but seeing the details was not the same as understanding. She murmured that this was his last stop, and he quietly agreed. Audrey turned to the director, announcing she wanted to make a donation. The director wore her polite mask, the one reserved for troublesome donors. She stated that Harbor House only accepted donations through the office. All terms had to be reviewed there. Audrey nodded, offering a massive sum. She wanted it in Noah's name, help, but with strings attached. His chest tightened as his old habits tried to soften things. She was trying. At least she had not told him to cancel his ticket. She chose money because her family only used wealth when emotions got messy. But letting his name be tied to her gift felt like a trap. The headlines would credit her family before he even reached Port Lark. So he said no. He told her to donate directly instead. Money could not use his name, carry conditions, or buy her access. She was trying to turn him into a project. Her shoulders went stiff. He told her to let the money help without owning his story. The director did not smile, but a quiet satisfaction showed in her eyes. Audrey stared, asking if he truly believed everything she did was about control. He replied that she only grabbed control when she could not speak her mind. The words felt heavy. Audrey looked away, staring down the quiet hallway. A 10-year-old boy sat on the floor, holding a cedar toy. He was calm, watched closely by a volunteer from a distance. Audrey's face twisted with unreadable emotions, but he refused to guess them. She asked him to step outside. He looked over at the director. The director noted his shuttle was not arriving for another 2 hours. He was free to talk or walk away, so he stepped outside. The humid air smelled of wet asphalt and faint citrus on his skin. A strange weight settled over him, like a future he had not earned. A door was opening. Enter if you want, or leave if you must. Audrey stood near the steps, nervously wringing her hands. She said their grandfather believed he needed real support for the move. She argued that Alderest still had much better rankings than Port Lark. The program was tiny and far away. If the excitement faded, what then? She warned he would only make things harder for himself. Her arguments were perfectly polished, practical, and completely designed to sway him. Yet she completely avoided the one simple thing he actually wanted. He cut her off, looking at her and asking what she truly wanted. She dropped the polish, stating she only wanted him to be reasonable. She calls it a strategy, her jaw flexing as she admits she just wants him safe. It is a condition. For one dangerous second, Noah actually wanted to help her. He wanted to throw her a lifeline, handing her words like he used to hand her flowers. Still, he wanted to do that heavy emotional lifting because his heart remembered old habits. But he holds back, keeping silent until Audrey is the first one to look away. She admits she wants this to stop feeling like a punishment, honest, but not enough. He tells her he is not leaving out of spite, but because staying would punish him. In a softer voice, she insists that he will eventually come back once the novelty fades. That stings deeply because she still needs his future to be just a temporary phase. Noah tells her he might fail, making her eyes snap back to him as he repeats it. Perhaps he gets out there and is completely ordinary. Or maybe Dr. Kessler realizes his live call was just one lucky moment and nothing more. It is possible he will miss Fairmont terribly and hate every mile, but that failure is his. That failure will finally belong to him. Audrey stays silent, which is answer enough. Noah heads back inside, hugs the director, and quietly says goodbye to the entire center. He does not make a speech. Those are always dangerous around Harbor House anyway. Someone always needs a snack halfway through, and honestly, that was just local democracy. Before leaving, a young 10-year-old resident hands him back his carved cedar toy. Noah tells them to keep it, but they shake their head, saying it belongs here. He closes his fingers around it, with no camera waiting to capture the quiet moment. Just a child returning an object, showing that the place trusted him with its memory. Carrying a small piece of home with him, departure morning finally arrives. Darius waits at the shuttle stop, holding an incredibly ugly travel pillow. It literally looks like a neck brace designed by someone with a massive grudge. He insists it is for posture and leaving his past with proper support. Noah warns him to never say that again as Darius hands it over, turning serious. Seeing Darius look serious is always strange, like a curtain suddenly dropping on stage. He promises no more romantic ambushes, no surprise segments, and no hidden microphones. No more setups for his own good. Noah thanks him, but Darius adds more. If Noah ever gets famous and needs an event producer, Darius is ready. He jokes that his boundaries are improving quickly, but right then, Audrey arrives. And of course she had to show up, but is Noah actually ready for this? His heart races instantly, and his tense body clearly disagrees with that thought. She stands a few feet away, close enough to talk but too far to touch. Asking if he has everything, Noah simply tells her he does. Their old life hangs heavy in the air as he waits for real emotion. Instead, she settles for the safest possible words as they stand together. They wait beside a vehicle that has far more clarity than their entire history. She tells him to call before making it worse once the novelty fades. Darius opens his mouth to speak, but Noah quickly glares at him. After he shuts his mouth, Noah turns to Audrey and warns that if he calls, it will not be for permission, but simply because he chooses to. As boarding is called, Noah grabs his bags. Audrey almost reaches out to help. But she stops herself. That quiet restraint is not a fix, but it counts. After the brutal week they survived, he definitely notices that small change. He boarded the shuttle while Darius waved that ugly pillow like a tragic flag. Audrey stood there in the morning light, the same spot where he once mistook being. Watched for actually being wanted, he looked away, focusing on the road ahead. As the shuttle pulled out of Fairmont, he gently rubbed his cedar toy. Instead of his bare ring finger, a small change but a massive victory. By the time he reached Port Lark, Oregon, the sky was wet paper gray. And his phone had 3 unread messages from Briar Coast University, including a text from Darius rating that travel pillow as emotionally historic. Noah opened the campus email first, trying to be the kind of guy who heeded caution, but we all know curiosity always wins when a phone buzzes. It expanded on his lock screen, showing his graduation photo and a cropped image of Sterling House. The caption called him Audrey Sterling's discarded charity case. He had not even received his room key, yet someone had already rewritten his entire identity. His new college welcomed him with a dorm key, a lab badge, and a viral post calling him Audrey's discarded charity case. Noah had hoped Port Lark would feel like distance. Instead, his first line on campus had strangers glancing at his phone, then his face, then away. With the guilty speed of people who had already read the nasty headline. They wanted credit for pretending they had not. The post used his graduation photo next to a cropped photo of Sterling House, aiming right for his healing wounds. It read, Audrey Sterling's charity case runs west after his public breakup, making Briar Coast a pity transfer. It was short, ugly, and efficient. Honestly, if humiliation paid rent, that caption would cover a studio. Noah saved the post before hot anger could make him do something stupid. That was his very first lesson here. When someone tries to write his story in public, he does not throw his phone into a decorative planter, archive first, then spiral later. Soon, staff handed him his key and pointed him towards summer program check-in. A nearby student in line whispered about Sterling House like it was a contagious diagnosis. Another eyed his badge, asking if he was the guy from that viral video. Noah just replied he was just looking for the safety training room. Less dramatic, harder to clip. Every step across campus felt like dragging the heavy chains of Fairmont behind him. He had walked away from the house, the money, and the girl whose silence once defined his world. Do you need 5 minutes? A voice suddenly asked. Or do you need work? That was Dr. Kessler's unique version of emotional support. No soft words, no comforting hand, just a strong hint that emotions were highly unprofessional. Noah requested work. She told him to put the phone away. He quickly complied because she was right and because he had spent an entire lifetime letting Audrey decide whether or not he belonged in a room. He would not hand that power to anonymous Uniloop commentators who treated context like optional seasoning. The orientation room smelled of fresh printer paper, citrus cleaning wipes, and the thick, dry anxiety of nervous students desperately pretending to look relaxed. A long table held sealed starter trays. Small crowd of newly admitted students stood waiting while the busy orientation staff prepped a video camera for the welcome feature. That was where he saw Grant. Grant Rohr entered Noah's life. He did not storm in. Men like him did not need storming. He arrived with polished shoes, a clipped microphone, and the easy smile of a man who was never forced. Noah Voss, he said, like the name was written on a cue card just for flavor. Welcome to Briar Coast. Noah did not know him yet, but he recognized the type. Expensive, calm, and perfectly calculated. He had a smile with a hidden price tag. Thanks, Noah replied. Grant offered his hand. He was hosting a quick feature on the summer cohort, and Noah's arrival was getting major attention. Noah joked that it sounded like a medical warning, making Grant's smile sharpen. It only hurts if attention makes you nervous, Grant said. Bad questions make Noah nervous. Dr. Kessler, standing close enough to hear the exchange, chimed in to say they should ask good ones. Grant's eyes flicked to her, then back to Noah, agreeing. He asked if people online were right, that Audrey Sterling helped arrange Noah's fellowship after the graduation scandal. Did Briar Coast reach out because of his own work or because of the Sterling family name? Talk about a trap. The camera light stayed on and students went totally still, waiting to watch a disaster unfold in real time. Noah's shame flared up. It always did when people linked his achievements to the Sterling name. That shame was deeply familiar, but then Noah remembered the old Harbor House hallway and Dr. Kessler asking him to explain every single choice. He remembered the signed release in his travel envelope and the physical house key. Sitting in his pocket, Dr. Kessler had offered this fellowship after evaluating him. Directly, Noah stated clearly that Audrey was not involved, and Edwin Sterling did not fund it. If Grant wanted to discuss the program, he could. Otherwise, they needed. Different guest, Grant tilted his head, noting how carefully Noah spoke about her. He learned care late, Noah replied. Dr. Kessler let out a soft noise of approval, though heavily filtered through her sharp academic lens. Grant smiled. Wider agreeing to shift back to the program, the prompt was simple enough. Every new student had to build a first impression using their sealed tray. It was a space they chose to enter. That prompt definitely hit a nerve. Doorways had been haunting Noah ever since graduation morning. Sterling family. Doors, harbor house doors, and campus doors, apparently his entire emotional life had become expensive architecture. Noah looked at Dr. Kessler, who nodded back. She warned him to check the beginner materials before using them. That warning saved him. The tray in front of him looked completely normal, sealed with clear film and basic labels, but then a corner lifted and a sharp, peppery scent leaked right through the edge. It did not belong with cotton or clean paper, his body knew. Noah stepped back immediately. Grant angled his microphone closer. Is there a problem? Yes, Noah replied. This is wrong. A staff member reached out, but Dr. Kessler stopped her. Gloves first, she ordered. Noah respected that practical mindset. Panic became a practical checklist. Grant let out a low chuckle. Calling it a strong reaction, Noah countered that it was about safety. Nerves do not smell like that. Dr. Kessler leaned closer. She ordered the staff to remove the tray immediately. Citrus peel, clean paper, and water lay on the verified table. Grant's expression remains friendly. That only makes things worse. Angry people just want to win. Friendly person with a camera is already building the edit. We can pause. The staff member says. Grant shrugs. Keep rolling, viewers love authenticity. Noah almost walks out. A clean exit is tempting, very tempting. Force him to perform after a setup that smells so wrong. He had spent the week teaching his spine that leaving is allowed. Then he notices two students glancing from the tray to his badge. If he leaves, the clip will become exactly what the host wants. Charity case. Boy panics under real standards. Grant does not need to prove anything if Noah gives him that perfect narrative, so he stays. Verified materials only, Noah says, and that tray stays far away from the table. Dr. Kessler looks at Noah over her glasses. Work, she says. The staff member brings the materials. Cotton, cedar, citrus peel, paper, and water. Just ordinary things, Grant's look suggests. Ordinary as if it is a flaw. Noah's hands disagree. He builds the cards small, laying damp paper first, catching the flat mineral aroma of rain hitting concrete. Cotton goes on the edge, clean but not blank. A scrape of cedar sits in the center, dry and patient. Citrus near the top, light enough to feel like an open window rather than a product trying to flirt with someone's wallet. Grant watches as if Noah's weakness is just decoration. He ordered. Grant calls it modest, but Noah replies it is a doorway. If it demands applause, it is probably a trap. One of the panel members takes the card. First, she closes her eyes for a moment, then passes it to another evaluator. Nobody gasps, no drama here. Noah is done with fake reaction bait. Designed for video thumbnails, the second evaluator calls it clear and stable. The citrus gives permission to enter without rushing the person through. Dr. Kessler asks what Noah removed from his original plan after the tray changed. Pride, Noah answers, making her mouth move slightly. Specifics, any detail that requires raw intensity to justify itself. The room has already grown loud. The work needs to lower the pressure, not prove he survived it. For a moment, the room belongs to his answer. Suddenly, applause. The students start clapping. It is smaller than graduation, but far more useful. They are not applauding a breakup, a scandal, or some romance gossip. They are applauding a choice Noah made with his hands after someone tried, making the room unsafe. Grant claps along, still smiling, still letting the camera drink everything. 2 hours later, his edited clip hits Uniloop. The setup tray, completely gone. So is Dr. Kessler's safety order. The clip opens on Noah's step back, cutting to Grant asking if Noah is nervous, before jumping straight to his finished card. Caption calls him bitter, defensive, and ungrateful for Door's wealthy elites. Opened, Noah stares at the screen in his assigned room, sitting on a bare mattress with no sheets yet, and feels that old shame crawling back into his throat. Mouth, Darius calls before Noah can even decide if the concrete wall looks punchable. Darius claims he's calling as a respectful, non-matchmaking crisis coordinator. Offering some cleaner branding, they both saw Grant edit a safety stop into a personality disorder, complaining about his camera angle and his villainous cheekbones. Noah actually laughs. Darius pauses, then asks if he is doing okay. A blunt, honest answer: do not comment while furious, just save everything and send him the links. Send the links for a backup. With no heroic thread battles, he had become extremely anti-ambush, a real growth arc. Terrible reviews taught valuable lessons, he sent him the links, not because Darius could solve it or because he was a hacker, lawyer, or some miracle in sneakers. He sent them because witnesses actually mattered, and Darius had finally learned the true difference between staging a scene and preserving one. Audrey called next, and he stared at her name until the phone buzzed against his palm. His first instinct was to reject it. His second was worse, to answer quickly, because some part of him still craved her attention. Believing it came with oxygen attached, he answered on the third ring, having reported the post. Audrey said no hello. Her greetings had always believed in arriving after the solution. Which one? The post using his image at Sterling House and the graduation footage. They had no permission to frame him as part of that story. Thank you for reporting your image, he said. The line went quiet for half a breath. That is all. That is a real thing. He was thanking her for the real thing. Her grandfather could issue a statement that his fellowship was legitimate. His chest tightened. He could hear the good intention near the bad habit, making everything much harder. Audrey was learning that command language had consequences, but she still had not learned that help with a handle was still a handle. No, he suggested Noah instead, since he had credibility. So does Dr. Kessler, Audrey countered. This was no time to be proud, but exactly the time to be careful. Her voice cooled. He could not reject help after living under her family's roof and act surprised when people questioned how he got anywhere. That blow landed hard, cutting too close to the caption and the part of him that still measured his worth in borrowed rooms. He went quiet until she finally called his name. He reminded her it was a formal host arrangement, with Edwin putting the limits in writing. He told her that if she wanted to correct the misuse of her own image, then do so. But she was not to speak for his fellowship. Audrey claimed she was only trying to protect him. Then stop making protection sound like ownership, he retorted, ending the call before his old habits could make him apologize. Dr. Kessler found him in the lab corridor 10 minutes later, holding a clear sleeve and a dated notebook alongside the rough card he had made under pressure. She ordered him to date every draft she instructed. He would seal witness samples and write down the exact purpose of the work before listing materials, explaining that people who confuse packaging with authorship absolutely hate records. To his question about her cold comfort, she replied it was weirdly effective. She told him to stop talking and sign. He signed, and she witnessed as the orientation prompt card went directly into a clear sleeve alongside the time prompt, verified materials, and a note about the removed tray. The sealed sample looked quite small and almost embarrassing inside the folder, but it also looked completely his. Hope did not arrive as some grand speech. It was real evidence that his hands had built something real before some digital edit tried to make him feel unreal. That night, after he finally threw sheets onto the bare mattress and pretended it counted as emotional stability, a private loop message popped up from Grant Roar saying nice save. Today, was he still rubbing his ring finger when pretending not to care? Some habits survive a marriage. He read those words once, then again, as the room seemed to. In this current timeline, he and Audrey had never been married. No ring had ever sat on his hand. Nobody at Briar Coast had seen him wake from those 6 painful years of quiet dinners, freezing rooms, and a love mistaken for duty. His life was reduced to service. Grant could have guessed his shame. He could have researched Sterling House or watched old graduation videos. He might have learned his posture and work, but he should not know this. His thumb hovered over the screen. For a second, he wanted to ask how. That was a stupid urge, but deeply human when you are hurting. A wounded heart often opens the door, because at least it feels familiar. Instead, he locked the phone. Grant Roar was just a smug host. He had a camera and a flashy caption, but ended the day differently. He became the first person in this life to tap on those hidden memories. The first fragrance he wanted to sell was meant to keep the lights on. But before sunset, his loose work card was gone and Grant had it. That was the rapid pace of Port Lark. in those first busy weeks. Every single time he built a door, someone tried to price tag it. They wanted a camera angle or tried to link him back to Audrey. Dr. Kessler stopped him from obsessing over Grant, giving him 2 rules instead. Focus on the work and keep moving forward. Then she showed him an email. The Harbor House director was complaining about rising summer costs. At the bottom, she wrote a warning about keeping things positive. If he made the project sad, she would reject it immediately. Dr. Kessler laughed. She once threatened to confiscate his martyr complex. She was a reasonable woman, and that message sparked the fundraiser idea. Harbor House needed funding, and he needed to prove his work could help. He refused to turn their struggle into pity theater, even though pity sells. So did Scandal. He wanted neither around children who deserved to feel safe. For their first actual run, they created a comforting scent called Home Notes. A blend of soft cotton, warm cedar, citrus, and clean paper. It captured the memory of a room that welcomed you without expectations. He kept the materials simple. The goal was never to show off. It was about recognition, creating comfort for those who understood. Home is not just a building, it is about leaving. Dr. Kessler evaluated the first draft and called it far too mournful. She told him to make the card breathe, so he adjusted the formula. He boosted the citrus, softened the cedar. She was totally right. Before launching the product, they hopped on a video call with the director. She appeared on screen holding a pen in her hand, ready to dismiss any nonsense. The lady did not play games when it came to her center. She immediately demanded rules. He greeted her back, holding up the label. No resident names, no faces, no sob stories, and no sterling mentions. All proceeds would go to Harbor House under her strict terms. That sounded much better. She leaned in with one final condition. Do not make her center sound like a haunted hallway to sell candles. That was just the first draft, but Darius had already arrived in Portlark. He arrived that morning with a camera bag, 2 portable chargers, and the fragile confidence of a man trying very hard not to ruin anyone's love life, lifting one hand from the side of the lab. For the record, Noah supports anti-haunted branding. The director studied him, calling him the microphone boy. Darius pressed a hand to his chest, recovering microphone boy, recover faster. Noah really should not have enjoyed that as much as he did. Darius had come to help stream the booth at First Maker's Market because he said a fundraiser deserved clean footage and because apparently Anti-Ambush Friendship had a travel budget before Noah let him touch a camera. He made him sign a paper napkin with 3 rules: no surprise romance framing, no confession jokes, and no using the phrase meant to be within 20 feet of his work. He signed with tragic dignity, complaining his art was being suppressed. Noah pointed out his art tried to marry him off. Darius claimed it had entered therapy. That was why Noah let him stay. Darius joked like breathing, but when the line was clear, he stayed behind it. First Maker's Market filled the campus courtyard with folding tables, nervous creators, parents pretending not to hover, and reporters hunting for the kind of young person success story adults could call inspiring without asking who it cost. Their booth was intentionally plain: white cards, small sealed sleeves, a sign with Home Notes, and Harborist-approved benefit language. No child photos, no sad music, no borrowed sterling shine. For almost 30 minutes it worked. People stopped because the card smelled familiar before it smelled impressive. One older student bought 3 and said it reminded her of moving into a dorm without crying in front of her parents. A staff member bought one for her desk. A reporter asked for the heartbreaking angle, and Noah pointed at the approved statement until she remembered reading was an auction. Then Audrey arrived. She did not arrive hidden, which mattered. She wore the polished calm of someone representing the sterling foundation and the caution of someone who knew Noah would notice every shortcut. She stopped at the edge of the booth instead of stepping behind it, stating she was there for a foundation assignment regarding student benefit projects. She wanted Noah to hear that directly from her. That was indeed new. Audrey Sterling had once treated explanations like accessories other people could wear if they needed reassurance. Now she had brought one before taking a step closer. So keep it an assignment, Noah told her. Her eyes moved over the booth, the approved language. Darius's camera and Dr. Kessler's sealed record folder. She agreed she could do that. Noah did not know whether she could. He knew she had said the words, and he knew he did not have to build a house inside them yet. Grant found her before the reporters did. He crossed the courtyard with his production assistant half a step behind. Him carrying a tablet and a slim folder, Grant had the relaxed posture of a person who considered public space a renewable resource. His smile landed on Audrey first, then on the nearest camera, greeting Audrey Sterling at the first makers. Market, Grant declared the season now had stakes. Audrey's expression cooled, stating she was there for the Sterling Foundation. Grant smiled and turned slightly, giving the camera their shared angle before anyone had agreed to share anything. He remarked it was great seeing the foundation support young creators. The frame was set. Audrey stands beside Grant, a prestigious voice, pure money next to the mic. A clean shot for the camera, perfect for people who hate messy cleanups. Noah's hands stay busy, methodically arranging piles of sealed card packs. Private jealousy is embarrassing. In public, it should at least help with inventory. A reporter shifts their gaze from Audrey to Noah, asking a sharp question. He explains that Home Notes solely benefits Harbor House, keeping things local. Dr. Kessler supervises the work, leaving the Sterling Foundation as a mere observer. Grant flashes a deeply sympathetic look, so perfectly polished it feels completely fake. He calls it a careful answer, hinting that Noah has hidden motives. Using a children's center just to keep Audrey's attention after leaving Fairmont. The courtyard chatter dies down around the loaded question. The trap is set. Charity as a leash, care as performance, children used as cheap props. That is the story Grant wants to sell, one where he is the hero. Noah's first instinct is pure anger. Then, the director's voice echoes in his head. Keep the center out of your personal drama. Nodding, he grabs the live stream tablet. He quickly initiates a video call with the Harbor House director. She answers immediately. Darius leans over, whispering if someone is being stupid. Darius mutters his absolute admiration, while Noah reminds him to stay professional. The director stares through the lens. Harbor House approved every single detail. Noah does not speak for the kids, and they control all privacy terms. Nobody gets to use these children as guilt props, buy a card or move. For once, Grant is utterly speechless. Dr. Kessler steps up to back her. The doctor adds that the work is fully documented, supervised, and clear. The center controls all terms. Those are the only facts that matter. Grant recovers instantly. Men like him treat shame as a minor setback. He smiles. He only hopes the buyers know what story they are supporting. Noah assures him they do. Right on cue, the crowd proves it. The line quickly doubles as hovering bystanders step forward to purchase. The scandal is forgotten. Now everyone wants to buy before they sell out. Darius keeps the stream steady, while Dr. Kessler manages the extra inventory. Audrey stands outside the booth, silent and clearly detached from everything. The director stays on the call, intimidating reporters into asking actual questions. Before mid-afternoon, they completely sell out. Noah should feel victorious. Instead, he feels a sharp sense of relief that almost hurts. The funds will go directly to Harbor House. The story stays clean. The kids were not used for his revenge. He feels genuinely useful. The heavy chain is gone. Darius leans in with a satisfied grin. He jokes that Noah's non-haunted cards achieved a massive market sweep. Noah bans that term immediately, prompting Darius to offer a capitalism hug. Noah declines. Across the booth, Audrey's lips twitch into a faint smile. Noah notices the gesture. He immediately hates the sudden spark of emotion. Turning back to the table, he accepts that personal growth takes time. If life respected good pacing, this massive crowd would be the end. But it is not. During the post-sale press chaos, Grant's assistant approaches. She clutches a heavy folder to her chest, looking extremely nervous. Noah spots her immediately. She moves like someone trying to vanish. She stood near Darius first, asking which angle captured the entire booth in frame. Then she shifted near the table while a reporter blocked his view, asking if Audrey's sudden arrival had boosted their sales. Harbor helped sales, he replied. The product did. Audrey just followed the boundaries he set. By the time the reporter moved, the assistant was already walking back toward Grant. That was all he knew then. A woman standing near his work area in a crowd. Suspicion is useful, but certainty needs proof, and he had promised himself he would stop building whole houses out of unearned feelings. Not earned. At teardown, he found the empty slot. His loose working card was gone. It was not the sealed original. Dr. Kessler had that in her record folder, signed and sleeved since morning. The missing card was much messier. Purpose lines, material notes, a phrase he had written, crossed out, and written again. A house is not a home until it lets you leave and welcomes you. Back, his stomach turned cold. Darius lowered his camera, asking him if it was packed somewhere else. It was here. Dr. Kessler checked the folder, then the table. Her face did not change much, which was how he knew she was angry. The sealed record is secure, she said. Do not accuse without evidence. Do not ignore the pattern either. It was an annoying middle path. Reality often lacks courtesy. Grant's voice cut across the courtyard before he could answer. He called Audrey for one more shot, posing near a sponsor backdrop with her beside him. The production assistant stood just outside the frame. Grant's hands settled at Audrey's waist like he had placed a logo there. Every ugly part of him woke up at once. In his first life, he had watched Audrey stand beside other polished men at events and told himself the ache in his chest was maturity. He had translated every public distance into strategy, every private coldness into stress, every missing reassurance into something he could fix. If he became more useful, this time he did nothing. Audrey did. She removed Grant's hand from her waist with 2 fingers and stepped out of the camera. Engel, do not touch me or use me to market this, she said, clear and public. No metaphor, no polished detour. The courtyard went quiet enough for her words to travel. Grant's smile held too long as he claimed nobody meant anything. I did, Audrey replied. That is why I said it. Hearing this, Noah felt satisfaction, jealousy, grief, and one tiny, inconvenient surge of respect arrive in the same terrible package. Audrey had not apologized to him. She had not repaired years of assumptions. She had simply stopped a hand and a story from using her body as cheap marketing. It did not buy her back his trust. When she looked toward him, he gave one small nod, acknowledgement, not invitation. Her shoulders lowered by a fraction, and she looked away first. Grant laughed softly into the nearest microphone, joking about strong boundaries. Today, an inspiring theme. Nobody laughed with him. That should have warned him. It did not. By evening, his teaser hit Uniloop anchor. The image showed Grant beside a dark, expensive-looking card with a caption about chosen homes, safe returns, and how real creators did not need to hide behind pity projects. Final line used his stolen phrase with the bones rearranged. A house becomes home when it anchors who deserves to stay. He read it 3 times, each one. It was even worse than the last. Grant had taken the materials but completely missed the meaning. And of course he did. Grant could copy cedar, cotton, citrus, and a sentence about home. He just could not understand why a door needed to open both ways, because he had never actually needed to escape. Then the online challenge loaded right under the post. Founders Night, a blind panel welcoming any brave imitators. To prove their originality, Darius stared down at Noah's phone over his shoulder. He stole your card and called you the knockoff. That is pure villain behavior with a massive marketing budget. Noah argued they had no proof, but Darius called it spiritual burglary. That is no legal standard, Noah sighed. Darius disagreed. Then Dr. Kessler took the phone, read the post, and handed it back, asking if Noah wanted a public complaint or a public answer. Noah already knew his choice, and that was the exact part that terrified him. Audrey approached from the edge of the courtyard before Noah could even speak. She had stayed far enough away not to crowd the booth, yet close enough to see the blow land. She offered to ask the staff to remove Grant from the sponsor line and promised to declare publicly that there was no official partnership with him. That was the classic Audrey showing through again. Solutions first, always. Real feelings were hidden somewhere behind her expensive shoes, but this time she had actually asked what she could do instead of deciding. Noah told her to make the image statement for herself, but not to turn this into a fight of Sterling Foundation versus Grant. Audrey's jaw tightened as she argued he was stealing from Noah. Then Noah had to prove what Grant could not steal. Audrey insisted he should not have to. That surprised her, and honestly, it surprised Noah too. He was so used to refusing help that agreeing felt like walking on thin ice. He continued. But if Audrey's family pressure removed him now, the story would look like rich people fighting over a charity case. That was Grant's goal. Noah needed him in front of a blind panel. Dr. Kessler agreed, saying authorship could be contested if the terms were controlled. Darius immediately voted for those controlled terms. And plenty of snacks, because revenge on an empty stomach leads to terrible speeches. Noah shot that down, telling Darius he was not naming the mission. Forget it, Noah said. Delete them all. Finally, Noah's deep anger cleared out, making room for something far sharper. His card was gone, but the phrase was definitely stolen. Grant had taken everything Noah cared about: history, Audrey's image, and Harbor's name. He even took the core concept, trying to sell it back as his own. But fine, at Founders Night, Grant could bring his cameras, his sponsors, and every single borrowed word he wanted, but Noah would bring something else entirely. He would bring the one thing Grant could never duplicate. This showdown is going to be epic. The official confirmation posted right under Grant's loud teaser, simple and quiet. Stating that Noah accepts the blind terms, Darius read it aloud with excitement. He sounded like a sports announcer who had suddenly found a conscience. Soon, Dr. Kessler was listing everything that needed to be sealed and dated. Audrey watched. From the edge of their little circle, kept just outside the center. That was exactly where the boundary belonged. Noah's actual card was gone, and Grant had a fancy teaser using Noah's words, but Founders Night would soon put the copy and the true creator before judges who only saw the craft. Since Grant messaged Noah about the marriage, this was the first time he wanted him to keep smiling. Grant presented every ingredient from Noah's missing work card, which was unfortunate for him because the list was not the part that made the scent his. If authorship lived in cotton, cedar, citrus, and a line about home, then every grocery receipt in the country was one emotional breakdown away from becoming art. Founders Night looked neutral on paper, blind panel, identical safe base materials, and coded samples. Before labels, no sterling foundation intervention, no public complaints, no dramatic speech about stolen souls, which was rude because Noah had been emotionally preparing several. Grant treated the terms like a gift. The audience would still see his packaging before the panel judged anything. Dark cards, heavy paper, and a display lit like it. Don't help, he was helping silently. That was not silent. Dr. Kessler gave both of them one look and somehow reduced their combined age by 4 years. Grant arrived with his production assistant, 2 event staff members orbiting him, and the relaxed confidence of a man surrounded by future captions. Audrey stood across the room near the sponsor line, not beside him, not beside Noah, and not pretending the difference was accidental. Noah noticed. Then he forced himself to look at his own table because growth was apparently a repetitive manual task. The event host explained. The terms, anchor, and his entry would be presented blind to the panel first. After the panel recorded its response, the labels and process records could be shown. Grant smiled through the whole introduction, all invented fairness, posture, and expensive patience. When Anchor went forward, he did exactly what thieves with good lighting always did. He recited feeling instead of proving it. A home, every word had Noah's fingerprints wearing his cologne. The sample itself was polished. He hated that. Petty satisfaction is cleaner when the copy is obviously terrible. Anchor was not terrible, it was smooth. Expensive and emotionally vacant in the way a staged kitchen could look. Beautiful while never surviving one real meal. The first panel member smelled the coated strip and nodded, pleasant. The second called it balanced, while the third paused longer, saying it felt familiar, but they were not sure it told them who was allowed to leave. The host asked the panel to mark its first response before anyone spoke. Again, pens scratched. Grant's display lights hummed. The audience waited for the kind of knockout that makes theft look like confidence. Darius leaned close enough to whisper, "Pleasant is judge language for a place with furniture." But no pulse. Noah almost smiled. Almost. Grant did not. His eyes slid toward him. Noah saw the irritation under the polish. The stolen list had not become a stolen reaction. Instead, the panel had handed him faint praise in a paper cup. Then it was Noah's turn, and the easiest mistake would be trying to defend home notes by rebuilding them louder. He desperately wanted to put the missing card back on the table with a witness, a spotlight, and a small choir of petty justice. Noah wanted the room to understand that Grant had taken the line, taken the shape, taken the wound, and still somehow missed the door. But home notes belonged to First Maker's Market. It belonged to the Harbor House director, telling reporters to buy a card or move aside. It belonged to the people who had. He understood home, so he built the work that came after it. Finally, he kept the base materials plain: cotton, citrus, clean paper, cedar, and water. Then he changed the order until the first impression felt like rain cooling threshold instead of a room demanding proof. The cotton came softer and later. The citrus opened like a window. The paper sat dry at the edge because memory did not need to flood the whole place. The cedar warmed in the center, steady. Without grabbing, his hands moved calmly, but his chest did not. Sterling House tried to rise in the back of his head. The guest suite, the entry table, the key. He Had returned, Audrey stood in a doorway, offering practical reasons that sounded almost like care. Then Harbor House answered it, labels on donation shelves. A director who rejected home. Home had never been the expensive room. Home was the place that let him leave without charging love as a fee. When the coded strip reached the panel, the room thinned around him. No cameras mattered. No packaging mattered. Even Audrey, standing too still near the sponsor line, became something he could not afford to interpret. The first panel member inhaled, then looked down at her notes. This feels like arriving after being expected, not summoned. Expected, not summoned. The second said there is movement, the opening is gentle but the center holds. The third asked why he left the paper so dry. He answered from his chair, because the blind terms allowed process questions after first response, and because Grant had already made the mistake of thinking ingredients were a confession, because memory should be present without soaking. The room, he explained that the person entering must know the past exists, but the door still opens now. Grant laughed softly, calling that poetic, using the same family of materials as an anchor. A door and a cage can both use hinges, Noah replied. The question is, what happens when someone reaches for the handle? The panel went quiet in the best possible way. Dr. Kessler did not smile. Her face suggested smiling was a luxury material awaiting peer review, but she set her pen down and he knew she had heard. He landed it. The decision came faster. Then Grant's face was ready to receive. Talk about high stakes. Nobody moved. The host checked the signed panel card, as if the answer might rearrange itself out of sympathy. It did not. Home finally won the blind panel. For half a second, the room forgot to perform sophistication. People clapped like the answer had relieved them. He sat very still because standing too quickly might have made him look triumphant, and his knees were negotiating with several legal departments. Grant clapped 2, 1, 2, 3 polite strikes of palm. Against palm, he looked like a statue receiving bad news. Only after the panel signed the decision did Dr. Kessler place the dated record folder on the table. She showed the sealed Home Notes original, the market work record, and the dated development page for Home. Finally, no lecture, no courtroom performance, just enough proof to make the timeline visible after the work had already won. The panel decision was blind, she said. These records establish process, not preference. That was Dr. Kessler's version of a victory speech. Efficient, unromantic, and capable of bruising a liar from across the room. An event representative approached with a small envelope and a face full of official excitement, announcing that the panel would like to invite Home finally. Hearing his full name tied to the American Scent Innovation Showcase felt completely unreal. That single announcement changed everything. For years, Noah Voss had only sounded like a boy attached to someone else's home, living on someone else's generosity, riding on someone else's future. But now, after this blind win, he was finally a creator whose work could stand entirely on its own. Nearby, Darius whispered, "National Showcase, totally casual, just a tiny evening with no real consequences." Darius joked about throwing his travel pillow into the ocean because it served its country. Noah let out a dry laugh, sounding shaky enough that his friend stopped teasing. Audrey waited for the congratulations to thin before she finally approached. She stopped right at the edge of his table, keeping her distance. Just like at the market, he hated noticing that restraint. She admitted he was right. The rival only had the language, not the work, she said, and now she agreed too. Once Noah would have collected those sweet words, like absolute proof that she had chosen him personally. This time they were just useful words, not sacred ones. Sacred? Audrey stared at his display, then glanced down at his official showcase envelope. She recalled the market, when he refused to let her use him for photos. Did that change anything, she asked. His honest response carried some pretty sharp edges. It only changed that one moment, he told her. Her face tightened, but she stayed. He reminded her that protecting her own consent was for herself, not a favor to buy his access. She looked down, whispering that she knew. He bluntly asked if she truly did. It was a cold question, but entirely fair. Audrey took a deep breath, apologizing. She was sorry he felt she was trying to buy her way back in. It sounded too polished. It felt wrong, even she realized it immediately, her mouth halting in shock as she stepped on glass. She closed her eyes, admitting that was not right. Noah just waited. His old self would have rescued her from this heavy silence. But he had changed, firmly committed to letting adults carry their own weight. Audrey opened her eyes, confessing she did not know how to speak without seeking approval. "Start with what you did," he demanded. Her fingers tightened around her bag strap. He wanted her to name the exact conduct. Name the harm, name what changes. That is his bare minimum. Regret is just a weather report, but repair is behavior. Watch how she absorbs that. She realized the door was locked from both sides. She admitted treating his future like a schedule. She said slowly, she admitted treating her support like a vote, expecting him to read her mind and calling it care when it served her. Her words hit Noah hard. Too close to home, no room for jokes. He picked up his folder. That is a start, he said, but not enough. It hurt to admit that truth. Suddenly, Grant intercepted him near the side hallway before he could reach the exit. Faint applause still leaked from the room. Grant's typical smug smile was completely gone, leaving his face looking younger and meaner. Audrey stood several steps back. Darius turned toward him, but Noah lifted a hand to stop him. Not yet, he wanted to hear the shape of the next knife first. Congratulations, Grant said, sneering that national attention suited him. It sounded painful to admit. He told Noah to enjoy it while the story lasted. His eyes dropped directly to Noah's left hand, mocking how he still checked his bare finger in secret. Noah's thumb froze against his bare ring finger. Grant's voice dropped to a whisper. Just like after the clinic report, same tight circle, same look, as if the paper would have killed him before the room ever could. The hallway narrowed. In this life there was no marriage, no clinic report, and no apartment where a piece of paper turned Audrey's silence into a nightmare Noah thought he could never survive. No one at Founders Night should have known that wound existed, let alone the gesture his body had made around it. Grant leaned closer, not enough to touch him, just enough to keep his warning private. Careful, Noah, some doors opened twice. Then he walked away before Noah could ask the question he had baited. Behind him, the room was still celebrating home, but right in front of him, Grant Roar had just touched a memory that had never actually happened here. The blind panel had proved he could not copy his work. Now Noah had to prove he had copied his life. The night Noah won his first public challenge, Grant told him something no one in this life could have known. He should have slept after that, but healthy people probably would have celebrated, hydrated, and made one responsible spreadsheet. Noah sat on the edge of his bed until sunrise, with the American Scent Innovation Showcase invitation on his desk, and his bare ring finger burning like it had been caught lying. By morning, fear had become useful enough to hold. Noah did not message Grant asking how. That was the trap he had laid in front of him. Payne loves a familiar address, and Grant had just proven he knew Noah's, so he chose a crowded coffee shop off campus, a table near the counter, and a lie small enough that only another person with his first life in his head could correct it. Grant arrived exactly on time because villains with media training treated punctuality like evidence of innocence. Brave, he remarked, sliding into the chair across from Noah. Meeting after win. Public room. Noah declared witnesses and bad acoustics for drama. He smiled. You think witnesses protect him? No, Noah thought they just annoyed him. That landed petty but educational. He set his phone face up on the table, not recording, just visible. Then Noah gave him the false memory. The clinic report came after the Friday argument, Noah said. The one in the apartment when Audrey said he loved being owed. Grant's eyes sharpened before his mouth remembered to stay relaxed. Tuesday, Grant corrected. Noah's pulse went cold. He leaned back, saying it was Tuesday, and that was not what she said. Noah kept his face still. Inside, every locked room in him opened a crack. Grant lowered his voice. She said, you make care feel like a bill I never signed. You stood by the kitchen counter and rubbed your ring finger until your skin went red. Then you apologized to her. That was always your problem, apologizing when other people cut you. The confirmation hit cold. Not a guess, not a background search, not a lucky cruelty pulled from public footage. Grant Roar remembered. Insane, right? Noah had wanted confirmation, but he had not expected it to feel like being robbed. Twice, once by the life that hurt him, and once by the man smiling because he had kept a key. He told Noah. He looked relieved. Noah replied he was just deciding if the coffee was worth finishing, still performing calm, still mistaking narration for ownership. Grant's smile thinned, then the real terms came out. He wanted Noah out of the American Scent Innovation Showcase. He wanted a public concession that home finally was derivative of Anchor. He wanted Noah to stop interfering with Audrey, which was a fascinating phrase from a man who kept Noah. Grant was shoving his hands, cameras, and captions where they did not belong. If he refused, Grant would turn his entire care history, Sterling House and Harbor, into A massive national scandal about an ungrateful, manufactured talent biting the hand that fed him. Grant spoke softly, making the threat even uglier. Loud warnings crave attention, but quiet ones. Assume the room is already theirs. The young man pointed out that Grant did not even want. Audrey, that made Grant's smug expression flicker just a tiny bit. He wanted the credit, the high status, the photo next to Audrey, and the glorious story where every door opens just because of his name. Grant laughed once, mocking him for getting sentimental over doors, but the young man asked which part of the clinic report Grant had altered. The smug smile vanished. For once, Grant actually looked less like a polished camera angle, and more like a desperate man frantically guarding a loaded, dangerous drawer. Grant warned him to stay careful, but the young man pushed for the absolute truth. Grant tapped the table, stating one report did 6 years of work. That was all he would get for free. The joking stopped, but the cafe noise continued. Buzzing around them, cups clinking, chairs scraping, and laughter fading near the pickup counter. The young man heard none of it cleanly. One report created 6 years of torment. He had blindly believed, the evidence that had turned a cold marriage into a self-made grave. A terrifying hope surged inside him. If Noah Grant had actually fabricated that report, then the worst things he believed about his marriage might be completely false. That did not make Audrey innocent, nor did it erase the painful years of silent dinners and ignored phone calls, where she let duty replace any real affection. Felt like useless furniture, but it shattered the evidence he had used to despise himself. But wait for it, Grant spots the shift and immediately tries to manipulate him. Walk away from the showcase, Grant urged, but the young man stood up right then. You corrected the date and gave me enough, he replied, walking away. He left before Grant could see his hands shake, and Darius was his first call. Not Dr. Kessler, not Audrey, and definitely not Edwin. Darius was different. This was the same Darius who once turned his life into a cheap graduation romance drama. Now they sat in a quiet campus study room as he listened closely. The young man finally confessed the most impossible, unbelievable secret. He woke up on graduation morning with 6 years of future memories. Grant knew everything about him, from his private marriage right down to the clinic report. He shared the texts and the cafe confrontation. Darius fell silent. Finally, Darius rated Noah Grant's entire villain monologue a pathetic 2 out of 10. The young man stared. Darius added that while the threat was horrifying, the staging was lazy. Cafe intimidation was just a desperate, pathetic brand pivot. The young man laughed. The laugh nearly broke in the middle, and Darius instantly softened, saying he believed him. Just 3 simple words, with no fireworks and no cross-examination. He did not demand proof of a past life that was barely survived. Infinite relief flooded his chest, and he warned Darius that absolutely nobody else could know. He agreed to only use current evidence, leaving out any talk of rebirth. And absolutely no bringing up Audrey. Darius agreed. This was why he chose him. Darius could joke the paint off any wall, but he respected boundaries like solid architecture. They set 3 rules before lunch: public meetings only, and duplicate every record. Finally, never face Noah Grant alone, even if the villain tried to use a private memory. He gave Dr. Kessler a version she could safely use after Grant threatened his showcase slot. Grant had access to his work language and might try to steal his next process. She listened quietly, then warned him to avoid setting any unsafe traps. No incomplete formulas either, because he knew the risks perfectly well. No emotional heroics, it felt highly targeted. Then Darius stepped up. Darius wanted to review his own archives from the first Maker's Market. Forget movie magic hacking, he just checked his long stream footage. Clean footage was his favorite, and he had plenty of storage left. That left him with extra storage and a sudden urge to be useful. 20 minutes later, he actually found something. This is where it gets interesting. A crucial moment was found right during the post-sale press surge. Grant's production assistant stood near the booth, clutching a folder. Though a reporter blocked the view, the side angle caught everything. Her hand moved with practiced ease, sliding his work card away. Then she turned, silence. His anger went completely cold and quiet. Darius pointed it out and ran it back, no dramatic zoom effects needed. Just clear footage of a hand taking the card off the table. The exact card he was warned not to mention without solid proof. Another moment appeared soon after, and this one felt even worse. For 3 seconds, Grant's charity sponsor logo flashed on their public screen. It vanished, but minutes later, the same language popped up on Grant's channel. Darius looked over, noting that while indirect, it was a clear link. Finally, there was enough evidence to stop calling his worries paranoia. This was more than enough to build a solid legal case. Dr. Kessler watched both clips closely, copying them straight into the records. Looking like a woman filing away a weapon, she saved them. She warned him to keep the evidence clean and simple. He joked she hated fun, but she simply hated sloppy mistakes. Fair enough, but Grant's threats went way beyond his work. Grant had begun using staged meetings to force himself around Audrey. The young creator hated calling her, but pride was too dangerous. Swallowing his ego, he dialed her number. She picked up immediately. Her voice was incredibly direct, instantly asking if he was all right. He told her he was simply setting some safety boundaries. Silence fell. The conversation had officially entered a room without cushions. Never take private rides with Grant, he told her firmly. Avoid meeting behind closed doors and reject unannounced sponsor appearances. If Sterling House or old records came up, route it through Edwin. All communication had to be in writing. Audrey asked what happened. Why did she suddenly need to treat him as a threat? Audrey paused, then asked if his worry meant he still loved her. That familiar pull was still there, heavy but completely honest. His genuine concern was being pulled toward a promise they had not earned. Gently, he told her that worry is never a promise. After a long silence, Audrey agreed to follow those safety terms. Bargaining but no statement offered, no Sterling-shaped solution in sight. Trying to sprint ahead of the wound, "Thank you," he said. After hanging up, he sent Edwin a short message. If anyone connected to Grant asks about Old Harbor House or Sterling House placement records, please preserve the request and do not answer by phone. Edwin replied 8 minutes later with a simple understood. It was enough to put one more door on a hinge. The decoy notebook came from Dr. Kessler's refusal to let him become reckless with better vocabulary. Grant made his next process the target, so he gave him a process that looked tempting. From a distance and failed where only arrogance would ignore it, the notebook held a plausible direction for a showcase piece, enough emotional language to smell like him, and one harmless flaw at the center. It admired a closed door instead of making room for a person to choose. Pretty marketable. Wrong. Dr. Kessler reviewed every page. No safety risk, she said. No safety risk, no usable complete formula. No usable complete formula. No chance. Person using this as written harms anyone, only their taste. She looked at him. Sorry, she said. Do not apologize, he replied. Accuracy matters. They placed the notebook monitored press access area during a scheduled lab visit, careless enough to tempt Grant's people, and controlled enough that nobody innocent had to be endangered. He hated how calm he felt. In his first life, isolation made every wound feel like fate. This time the plan had witnesses, limits, and a mentor who would have confiscated his spine if he tried to martyr himself with stationery. By evening, the lab footage showed the same production assistant step into the area, photograph the open pages, slide the notebook under her folder, and leave. Dr. Kessler watched it once. Now they wait, she said, his least favorite sentence. Popular sentence, good. The wait lasted less than a day. The American sent Innovation Showcase updated its preliminary creator listings, and Grant Roar's new concept appeared under a clean black title, Crownline. The description praised permanence, legacy, and a door that proved its worth by staying closed. Darius read it over his shoulder and whispered that he stole the decoy and somehow made it emotionally worse. He stared at the listing until his satisfaction cooled into something sharper. Grant had taken the bait. The footage supported the market theft. Darius knew the truth. He could not tell the world. Dr. Kessler had the current records. Audrey had accepted safety terms without trying to purchase his concern. Edwin had preserved the record path since he woke up with 6 years of marriage in his head. Grant had forced him to react to him. Now he was reacting to his plan. That should have felt safe. It did not. A man who stole a harmless flaw after treating access like authorship would not become calmer when the flaw failed in public. Crown Line was not the end of the trap. It was the part where the trap finally had his fingerprints on it. He knew the sample bottle was wrong the moment a teenager coughed, but by then Grant had already made his name the headline. The American Scent Innovation Showcase Youth Preview was supposed to be harmless, small group, safe. Materials, staff nearby, a few teen volunteers giving early impressions. Before the national event turned every young creator into a walking audition tape. Dr. Kessler had reviewed his tray twice, then made him review it again. Because joy was apparently less important than basic survival. Darius wore an event lanyard like it had promoted him to democracy. He was there as witness support, he said. He was only there because he promised not to name any operation. Darius argued witness support can have branding, and witness support can have silence. He looked wounded in 3 separate fonts, but he stopped. Grant stood across the preview space, with his crown line displayed in clean black packaging and a smile that made generosity look privately armed. His production assistant moved near his cases, with a folder tucked against her chest. He noticed her. He noticed everyone after Founders Night. That did not give him permission to invent proof from posture, so he checked his own table. Instead, label outer seal, tamper band, code strip all correct. The wrongness arrived inside the first drop. He touched the blotter behind the demo line before offering it forward the way Dr. Kessler had drilled into him until caution became muscle. The scent opened too sharp, not complex sharp, not clean sharp, just wrong, like a bright edge scraping the back of the throat. The teen volunteer nearest the table coughed once, then again her eyes watered. Everything in him narrowed. Step back, he said, hands away from the cards. Everybody back. The staff member beside him started to ask a question, and he cut across it. Medic now. He capped the bottle, moved the tray away from the volunteers, and put his body between the table and the group without turning it into a heroic statue. Heroic statues are great until somebody realizes they blocked the exit. He pointed the teens toward the open side of the room and kept his voice flat enough that panic had nothing dramatic to grab. The volunteer said, her eyes burned. That was where every joke in his body died. Dr. Kessler reached them with the on-site medic. Seconds later, Darius stopped filming the event floor and started clearing space. Event staff asked whether the product had been approved, whether he had changed the sample, whether the volunteer had allergies. The questions mattered. The timing still felt like being pelted with clipboards while a person was trying to breathe. She comes first, he said. The medic flushed her eyes and moved her to a quieter chair. The symptoms eased fast, which was the only reason his hands did not start shaking in front of the cameras. The medic cleared her in the room, and the prepared caption lost whatever worse ending it had been built to use. Still, a teenager had coughed near his table. That fact did not care how carefully he had packed the tray. He stayed until the medic cleared her. He apologized to her directly, not because he had chosen the switch, but because his table had become the place where she got hurt. Her privacy mattered more than his defense. So when a staff member asked whether she could be named in the incident report, he said no before his fear could make him selfish. Then the post hit. Grant's channel already had the clip framed, titled, and dressed for punishment. Reckless student creator. Untrained fellowship. Youth preview halted after unsafe sample. The caption slid Harbor House into the sentence like a blade under a door, asking who had really been harmed by his sudden rise. Prepared headline, prepared angle. Prepared pity turning into suspicion. The showcase paused his slot pending review. The Harbor House promotion tied to his work froze an hour later. Within minutes he stood in the hallway. The wrong bottle sat on the table. Dr. Kessler stood beside him. Darius paced a tight, angry circle nearby, mumbling physics. His name was already becoming a warning label online. It looked like Grant's first clean win. He hated that word. Then Audrey called him first. He almost ignored the call. After all, pride loves treating ringing phones as tests. But then he remembered his warning. Keep all old record questions in writing. Boundaries work. He cannot treat every offer of help like a threat. She asked if he was safe. The volunteer is safe, he replied. What about him? He stared at the paused status message on Dr. Kessler's tablet. Professionally, he was a cautionary tale. Then came the offer. The Sterling Foundation could cover his lost promotion and correct the records. It was the old fix, money first, message second. Feelings nowhere to be found, but her voice shook this time. No money, he told her firmly. She went silent. No statement that clears him. Either no family defense, no foundation rescue. Speak only what belongs to you. If you say anything, speak only of what belongs to you, what belongs to me. Your name, your family's public role, whether Grant had permission to use them. Audrey took a slow breath. That is smaller than what I want. Good. The old Audrey would call this defiance. This Audrey held the line. She promised to state that neither she nor the Sterling Foundation funded his work, controlled his research, or authorized Grant's implied endorsement. She added that she would not speak for his sample, warning him not to turn Harbor House into his proof. True to her word, she released the statement 20 minutes later. It was narrow, factual, and incredibly blunt. It did not try to save him. She corrected Grant's implied endorsement, denied his claims, and stopped before his name became their family project. Became something her family polished for him. It did not unpause his slot, but did something smaller and harder. It respected boundaries. Now watch this turn. Darius and Dr. Kessler finally found their first real lead in some boring footage. Bad angles and one accidental reflection. Darius had been standing right there, near the sponsor display, when staff pulled the preview footage for review. The display behind Grant's table had a glossy black side panel. In that panel, for half a second, the room was reflected backward. The assistant appeared on screen with two identical inner cases, swapping them in a flash. The outer band on his tray still looked untouched because the swap happened entirely inside the case beforehand. This reflection did not show Grant giving orders, nor did it show the assistant's face clearly enough to make a public claim. But it showed hands, cases, timing, and a movement that finally gave his suspicion solid weight. Soon, Dr. Kessler found their second major crack. Inside the return case, under the foam insert, sat the thin inner seal from his original bottle, folded flat where no volunteer would ever notice it. He had marked that seal in the lab because Dr. Kessler always encouraged his careful paranoia. The wrong bottle had been placed in a case that still looked identical to his from the outside, holding up the seal. With tweezers, she looked at him. This supports a switch, she said, but who? It did not prove who ordered it. He knew. Say it again just because he was angry. That was better. Darius leaned over the footage. So this villain package was missing the villain receipt. He respected the evidence, even while emotionally protesting. Fair enough. The deal came after midnight, but Grant never called. Calls leave too much room for tone to betray him. He sent a clean message. Enough to screenshot, but dirty enough to smell of him. He could speed up the review, move faster, or remind the right people that youth previews were chaotic. He could help restore trust if he publicly acknowledged that Home had finally grown past Anchor's influence and transferred all the disputed work rights, and thanked Grant's support, along with sterling charity, for making his own training possible. Some people simply threaten the future. Grant, however, preferred to make the target autograph the threat and call it gratitude. He read the message once, then again, apparently because he had developed a taste for indigestion. Dr. Kessler said no, she had only guessed, but wanted the room to enjoy certainty. Darius pointed at the phone, voting to mail him a glitter bomb of consequences, but they were not doing evidence-based glitter, which he called a coward sentence. The humor helped for exactly 2 seconds. Then his thumb found his bare ring finger, and the old apartment rose in his head with the report and Audrey's missed call. Grant's line in the coffee shop about one report doing 6 years of work. If he signed, Grant owned the work. If he only refused, Grant kept the old truth. So he offered him something he wanted more than his signature. He sent over one photograph of a decoy page from the harmless notebook, cropped enough to show the emotional direction behind crownline and nothing that could endanger anyone. Then he wrote, "You want the rest of the pages. I want the truth about the clinic." Report. His answer came fast. "You are finally learning value." His stomach turned, but he still typed public place. Grant chose a hotel lounge with glass walls, afternoon traffic, and enough background noise to make a private recording messy. Then he added the sentence that cut deepest, "Come alone and I will tell you what the report said after Audrey refused your final call." He stared at the screen. Sentence until the screen dimmed. Audrey had refused his final call. He remembered that. He remembered the phone lighting his hand in a dark hallway, the ring ending, the silence afterward becoming evidence because he had needed that pain to make sense. Grant had just tied that memory to the report like he tied a ribbon around a knife. Darius read over his shoulder and stopped joking. "Rules," he said quietly. "Public meeting," he said. "No solo response. You will be in sight. Dr. Kessler gets current evidence only. No rebirth." Dr. Kessler looked between them, catching the shape of limits she did not know the center of. She did not push. That was one of the reasons he trusted her. "No unsafe trade," she said. "Only decoy pages and no complete formula." "No complete formula." She nodded once. "Then make him talk. Do not let him make you bleed for free." The hotel meeting was set for the next afternoon. His showcase slot was still paused. Harbor House still paid for the scandal, frozen promotion, and nervous messages. Looking closely at the reflected clip showed a switch. The seal supported it, and Audrey had only corrected her own facts. Grant's terms treated him like he was desperate enough to sell his name back. He was going to sell. He showed Grant a fake door to make him pay with the truth, offering him a fake notebook, and Grant paid for it with the truth about his first life, the hotel. Lounge had glass walls, low tables, and the kind of expensive silence people buy, so nobody can hear their worst sentence clearly. Grant chose a corner seat with his back to the room. He chose the chair that kept Darius in his line of sight. Near the entrance, one hand around a coffee he had no intention of drinking. Grant noticed immediately, reminding him that he was supposed to come alone. He insisted he did. Darius came separately because he makes independent mistakes. Across the lounge, Darius lifted 2 fingers in the saddest little salute. Grant's mouth tightened. There was no live stream, no public accusation, and no secret courtroom. Fantasy, he set his phone on the table face down. This meeting proves nothing. By itself, when asked why he brought Darius, he said he was done walking into rooms where Grant's version is the only one that survives. The hotel server placed water between them and vanished with the professional grace of someone who had smelled rich boy poison and chosen a different ecosystem. Grant held out his hand. He placed 3 decoy pages on the table, printed, cropped, and harmless. Enough to look like the emotional spine behind Crownland, useless for anyone trying to build a real safe sample. Dr. Kessler had checked every line and looked offended by how marketable wrongness could be. Grant glanced at the pages and smiled, mocking him for always dressing surrender up as principle and confusing possession with authorship. He noted everyone had hobbies, making Grant's smile thin. He didn't ask about the clinic report first. That was the bait sitting in front of him, shiny enough to ruin his judgment if he grabbed it whole. Why did the reckless student headline exist before the volunteer coughed? He asked, leaving Grant looking amused. Grant asked if timing was evidence. He replied that prepared shame has a smell. Grant called assistance useful for knowing what to prepare. It was no direct admission. Was too polished for that. It was worse because it showed the shape of the next sacrifice. If the switch became undeniable, his words had already picked the person who would absorb it. Useful because they can be blamed, he asked. He shrugged, saying useful people understand hierarchy. With that, his anger went cold. Again, he wanted to throw the water in his face, but that would be satisfying for half a second and strategically stupid for the rest of his life, so he kept his hands on the table and let silence fill the room. He demanded the report. Grant looked down at the decoy pages, noting he built his whole misery around one envelope. When asked which part was real, Grant laughed. Soft and ugly, the paper, the fear, and his face when reading it were all real. Which part was true, he asked. Grant's eyes sharpened without a camera to soften them, answering that none of the part making him hate himself was true. The lounge did not move, but his body did. His throat closed, fingers pressing into the table. He had imagined a dozen answers since the coffee shop, yet his mind still arrived empty when the sentence landed. Grant's smile widened. The clinic report was forged, Grant said, and the affair evidence was staged. Audrey was never pregnant, meaning there was no child waiting anywhere for him to discover. There was only timing, paper, and a man who wanted him to finally understand he had lost. Those words entered him slowly. Forged, staged, with no child and nothing real. He had spent 6 years carrying that forged report like absolute proof of his own failure. He used it to justify Audrey's cold silence and make himself believe he deserved it. It explained why his marriage felt like a hallway with no doors, a dead end. Why every apology had to be his. Grant had not invented their cold dinners, though. He had not made Audrey replace affection with cold duty, draining the life from them. Those memories remained, but the proof that forced him to hate himself just shattered. The very foundation of his guilt had just cracked completely in half. He asked about the final call. Grant only smiled, looking sentimental. Grant asked if he blocked it. No, he leaned back, calling it beautiful. Audrey ignored him herself. She was tired of his needs after their fight. He called and she watched it ring. Grant just delivered the report right then. The lie was broken now, but the deep wound remained. That hurt him most. Relief did not feel clean. It only dragged a fresh wave of grief behind it. Grant forged the evidence, but Audrey still refused to answer. He knew the truth now. He could reject one poison but still taste the other. Why us? He demanded. Grant finally lost his polished smirk for a second. Because you were an accident. The old, familiar fear inside him recognized that word. He was just an accident. A charity case, a dependent, useful only if placed in the right spot. Grant wanted Audrey to owe him. He wanted the glory of the rescue. Grant had arranged the whole situation. He had carved out the perfect path. But a harbor houseboy ran in first and became her savior instead. His pulse went dead quiet. He remembered that teenage rescue in scattered pieces. Audrey's panic holding her hand and how adults turned gratitude into obligation. Help and heavy obligation had blurred together. He never knew who caused the danger. Now get this, Grant spoke like it was nothing. He accused Grant of arranging her abduction. Grant told him not to be crude. Grant claimed he only arranged a rescue, but he accused him of stealing the role. His anger grew so massive that it did not even need a voice anymore. He pictured young Audrey with a blank memory gap she never truly understood. He saw Edwin turning protection into strict expectations. A house where he was constantly gasping just to earn some air. And there was Grant watching lives break without a single shred of remorse. He looked at him and asked what exactly was not fabricated. Grant smiled with perfect, rehearsed timing. Her contempt was real, he said. Her refusals, her silence, and the way she let him serve until she got bored. He did not need to fake that. Grant only provided the paper to prove it. He heard the deep satisfaction in Grant's voice, but he also recognized the dangerous trap. Accepting it made Audrey a prop. Rejecting it made him a fool again. He would not be the idiot who apologized while bleeding. He made a choice. He separated his wounds. You forged the report, he told Grant. You staged the fake affair and set up that teenage attack. You weaponized her silence to destroy me. Grant's eyes instantly went cold. Audrey still made her own choices. He remembered that and refused to back down. That was not for Grant to absolve. For once, real fury crossed Grant's face. It was not a performance, just pure rage that his favorite toy was broken. A toy the right to define every person in the room. He stood, enjoy the pages. You. Think those are enough, he asked. For you, probably. He left them on the table. Darius met him near the entrance, face already stripped of every joke. He did not ask what Grant said until they were outside and away from the glass. Clinic. Report was forged, he said. He closed his eyes once. No child, he said, the words. Scraped, the affair evidence was staged. He says Audrey ignored the call herself. He says he arranged the old abduction so he could be the rescuer. Darius looked like he wanted to become violent and knew he needed him to become useful. What do we do, he asked. We prove current harm first. Grant helped with that. Before sunset, because arrogance is a generous donor when properly irritated. His public statement blamed the youth preview switch on an unauthorized action. By his production assistant, he announced that she had been removed from his team and implied she had mishandled materials after becoming overzealous. About rival creators, it was a tidy sentence, too tidy, people like Grant. Loved disposable workers until the disposal needed witnesses, the assistant. Contacted Darius that night through the event contact he had used for footage. Requests, her message said she did not want a stage or sympathy. Her statement said that if Grant was going to ruin her career for following his order, she wanted the record to show him bleeding on the same document. Darius called him. Before opening the file, current evidence only, he asked. Current evidence only. Dr. Kessler can see this if it proves the switch. The voice note was short, Grant's voice, stripped of charm by the flatness of a phone. Microphone said to use the identical case. Keep the outer band clean. The first cough gives them the headline. After that came the prepared headline. File timestamp before the preview, and the assistant's direct statement that he had threatened to ruin her career if she did not take the blame. He sat very still. While Dr. Kessler listened, her face did not move until the end, then she closed the laptop with both hands. That is current evidence, she said. Yes, they use exactly what it proves. Yes, her eyes stayed on him, no extra truth smuggled inside the proof because you are hurting. He hated how well she knew the dangerous version of him. Exactly what it proves, he said. Edwin's file arrived the next morning. On the call, Edwin told him Audrey had asked him to reopen the old rescue records after his safety warning, then pushed harder after Grant's public scapegoat statement. Edwin said she did not know about the first life or what Grant had just told him in the lounge. From what he had seen, she only knew Grant had started circling Harbor House, Sterling House, and Old Placement records with a smile too prepared to be harmless. Edwin asked them both to join. Private call. He looked older on the screen than he remembered from the graduation call, or maybe he had finally stopped seeing him as the ceiling of every room. He did not begin with authority. He began with the file. This never identified the organizer at the time. Edwin said it was enough to show that the rescue was real, that Audrey's memory was fragmented, and that his placement followed the incident. It was never enough to accuse a teenage suspect. Publicly, the archive held an old plate image, a payment trail through intermediaries, and a witness note about a young man near the pickup point. None screamed Grant's name across the room, placed right next to his account in the lounge. It no longer looked like a coincidence. Audrey sat beside Edwin on the call, silent at first. Then Edwin looked at him, calling him the one who reached her first. That much was always clear. Those words should have felt like a victory. Instead, they just gave a name to an old wound. After he had spent years paying rent on it, Audrey covered her mouth with one hand. She did not make this about being forgiven. She did not ask him to explain the marriage she could not remember, or the report she did not know had existed, or why his face looked like every locked door inside him had opened at once. She only asked to speak with him privately if he would allow it. He almost said no, not because she did not deserve to speak, but because part of him wanted to punish her timing. Another part wanted to accept anything that sounded like repair. His body was exhausted, yet still loved her in that inconvenient, humiliating way bodies sometimes keep old dresses. 10 minutes, he said. No solutions first, she nodded. When Edwin left the call, Audrey stayed seated with her hands visible on the table, controlled. Terrified maybe, but he only knew what she showed and said. She admitted she assumed his birthday labor. She confessed she treated his attention like infrastructure at Juniper Cup and insulted someone doing their job because she expected the room to bend around her. His throat tightened as she kept going. She had weaponized her family support when he chose Briar Coast and tried to manage his image when Grant attacked him. She treated one healthy boundary at the market like it should count toward romantic credit, making his life feel like a shared asset because she benefited when he forgot it belonged to him. Her apology stripped away all polish, the elegant excuses, and the familiar fake phrase of being sorry. He felt that way. Only the harm remained. What changes, he asked. Audrey looked directly at the camera. She promised to speak only where she had authority, leaving the evidence alone, without using money or access to escape. She promised to stop asking if his concern meant love, if he chose future contact. It would not be because she made herself useful during a crisis. That confession stung, because it was exactly what he had needed to hear. Making his first instinct to forgive too much too fast, he looked away toward the blank wall beside his laptop and forced a breath. He accepted her accountability and agreed to work together against Grant. Audrey's face lit up with hope, but he stopped her before it could grow. He was not accepting romance or offering forgiveness. He still remembered 6 years she had forgotten, and this life had already hurt him enough to require time. Audrey swallowed and said she understood. She actually sounded like she did. That was a start, not a promise. By afternoon, their evidence table was split in two. The first pile could easily survive daylight. The footage, his original inner seal, Grant's voice note, the prepared headline file, the assistant's direct statement, Audrey's narrow public correction, and Edwin's archived rescue record limited to what it actually showed. But the second pile would destroy far faster and rot everything it touched. Rebirth, the forged reproductive claim from the first life, the staged affair evidence, and their most private. Audrey's old trauma was off limits. The darkest part of him still craved ruthless revenge. That was the part believing he actually deserved every bit of humiliation. He wanted to drag every lie into the open, destroying Grant completely. Then he stopped. He pictured the tearful teen volunteers instead. He imagined Harbor House becoming nothing but a cheap scandal machine. Audrey's teenage terror would become public entertainment if he mistook exposure for justice. Real care should liberate people, a rule he ignored for himself. For years, he had to prove those words, even when keeping quiet cost him. He decided to only leak the current sabotage, keeping other secrets locked away. Grant's attacks would be met with facts, but the rebirth stayed completely private. That dirty first life fraud remained hidden. Dr. Kessler demanded clean boundaries. Audrey fell silent. She thanked him for protecting her deepest pain. Meeting her eyes through the screen, he told her he was not protecting her out of ownership. She knew, for once, he truly believed she meant it. His showcase slot remained paused when he submitted the evidence packet. It went through proper channels, though Grant's crown line was still listed. Grant still had his sponsors and a stolen decoy sitting in his display. It was staged to look authentic, yet the old report no longer controlled him. The recent sabotage finally had a voice as he stepped onto the national stage. Grant possessed the stolen notebook and featured Audrey's face in his sponsor reel. His presentation assumed that Audrey and the protagonist would never stand together. The slot was suddenly reinstated 2 hours before the judging began. Talk about stressful timing. The organizers clearly wanted a dramatic show. This was their version of fair, pure chaos. The switch footage and assistant statement cleared his name completely. Still, they were not going to erase the blind entries or cancel the competitor. Crownline remained in the locked lineup at the Scent Showcase. The staff barred Grant's team from the backstage prep area. Darius looked highly offended by the universe. That was when they acted. They released the voice note, exposing exactly what Grant had done. Bad timing, but it helped, and he stepped backstage. Grant was visible on the monitor, smiling without a care. Crownline looked incredibly expensive, but we all know looks can be deceiving. The display was sleek, and the fancy sponsor reel played seamlessly. It featured Audrey Sterling's face, alongside hollow words of ambition. He looked like a confident thief wearing a borrowed suit. The video never claimed an endorsement, but it implied one heavily. That was Grant's favorite trick, making any denial look petty. Naturally, he presented Crownline as a majestic fragrance about legacy. Thieving men like Grant loved legacy because it masked their crimes. The judges sampled the blind strips first before the public reveal. For a brief moment, the crowd seemed to fully accept his stolen work. Then the harmless flaw planted in the decoy notebook ruined him. The fragrance finish suddenly fell flat, turning metallic, cheap, and utterly thin. That beautiful opening, scent suddenly felt like nothing more than a cheap painted illusion. This was not safety. It showed the gap between truly understanding a note and stealing a sentence where that note once stood. Across the aisle, Darius leaned toward him and whispered, "That is a luxury candle having a boardroom panic." Tack adding he enjoyed it responsibly despite himself. Meanwhile, Grant smiled. Held for the flashing cameras, but the room shifted around him. The judges did not. Gasp, real professionals rarely gave villains the courtesy of dramatic punctuation. Instead, they took notes, asked him to clarify, and listened. While he tried to turn a collapse into philosophy, then Audrey requested the floor. His first instinct was still the old one, tense up and prepare to refuse. The body remembers being managed before the mind remembers boundaries. But Audrey did not look at him for permission or praise. She walked to the event microphone because her image had been used, and that was hers to answer. Grant's expression sharpened. "Audrey, this is really a private misunderstanding," but there was no private agreement to misunderstand, she countered. The room quieted. She kept her voice level, carrying the same polished control that used to make every room rearrange itself for her. Only this time she used it to stop a lie. "I am not engaged to Grant Roar. I am not his romantic partner. I have no business partnership with Crownline. I did not authorize my image, my family role, or the Sterling Foundation to endorse his entry." Grant lifted one hand like he could smooth the air, claiming it reflected a shared philanthropic vision. But Audrey interrupted. "It reflected unauthorized proximity." That line landed harder than a slap because she did not sugarcoat it. She did not call herself confused. She did not ask anyone to understand the pressure. She did not look over at him. Like a student waiting for extra credit in redemption class, she only returned the microphone and stepped back. For one dangerous second, he wanted to breathe. Like that solved more than it did. It did not, but it solved this. Then his name was called. He had finally answered the wound of where he came from. Open Door had to answer the question he was still afraid to touch. What made a place yours after you stopped letting people trap you with gratitude? He placed the sample on the stand with both hands. Dr. Kessler had taught him that state. Nerves loved making fingers clumsy. The Harbor House director appeared by video. From an empty office, no residents on camera, no children turned into proof. Darius gave him one nod from the aisle. Audrey stood near Edwin, hands folded. Silent, Grant watched like a man trying to calculate how much of his life he could still invoice. "Open Door is about choice," he said, "entering because you want to." He kept the explanation short, because the work was supposed to carry. The feeling, clean cotton came first, airy rather than innocent. Citrus opened. Instead of begged, cedar sat underneath, familiar but still unlocked. Rain moved through the middle because every door worth keeping had to survive weather. He left the ratios, genius costume, and desperate lecture outside the room where They belonged just a door. Grant laughed under his breath loud enough for the nearest microphone to catch the shape of contempt, recycled sentiments. He kept his eyes on the judges. If it were that easy to copy, Crownline would have. A finish, Darius made a sound that may have been a cough, if a cough had ever. Even with a petty damages claim, the blind panel took longer with open door than they had. With Crownline, that hesitation scared him more than instant praise ever would. They returned. The strips asked for the story again and listened closely when the Harbor House director confirmed that any public benefit tied to his work would protect resident privacy and center control. Dr. Kessler answered one safety question and stopped there because she had the rare academic gift of not turning a microphone into a home. Then the public side opened and people did not cheer. At first, they got quiet, which mattered far more. He watched strangers lean toward. The strips, like the scent, had given them a handle to a room left years ago. One judge closed her eyes, opened them, and wrote a sentence so slowly that his pulse started doing unpaid labor. When the final blind results came, in open door placed first, you can't make this up, he froze as the applause erupted late. Then all at once, Dr. Kessler's mouth tightened in the closest thing she allowed to a public smile. Darius punched both fists down at his sides like he had just won an argument with gravity. Audrey watched him, and the old part of him wanted to turn that look into permission to be happy. He did not. He looked at Dr. Kessler first. That victory belonged to the life he had built, not the life he escaped. Grant clapped 3 times, slow and polished like a beautiful sympathy result. The old fraud defense arrived right on schedule. If the work won, pity had voted. He took the microphone before anger could make him theatrical. The judging was blind, he said, but since Grant wants the room to discuss sympathy, they can discuss preparation instead. Darius released the evidence packet to the showcase review screen and the public feed. He released current proof only, no rebirth, no clinic fraud, no first life wound that belonged in private, because he was finally learning that exposure was not the same as justice. The wrong profile capture appeared first, showing the charity smear briefly posted under the assistant's account before it moved to Grant's channel. Then the market footage showed the assistant sliding his loose work card into a folder. Then the youth preview reflection showed the identical cases before the original inner seal appeared. Beside Dr. Kessler's lab record, Grant stepped forward, calling it edited. Event staff have the source footage, he said. Just then the voice note played. Grant's own voice filled the room, flat and stripped of charm, saying to use the identical case and keep the outer band clean because the first cough would give them the headline. No one applauded. Good. Some evidence should not get applause. It should make a room understand who had been willing to spend a teenager's safety, an assistant's career, and Harbor's name just for a cleaner camera angle. The assistant's statement followed. Brief, concrete, and without any performance, she confirmed the order and the prepared headline file, exposing the threat that her career would absorb the blame if the switch surfaced. Dr. Kessler verified his dated work and sealed samples of it. Staff confirmed the reflected clip came from their own review footage. Grant's face did something he had wanted to see for longer than was spiritually flattering as it stopped being a camera angle. He recovered fast because men like Grant always kept a backup mask in their pocket. He asked if this was the story now. He said, mocking how the Sterling family's charity project becomes a genius, winning a fishing for a sympathy vote, throwing edited scraps at the very people who built him. The whole room turned. That accusation, it knew exactly where to hit. It used pieces of truth like teeth. He had lived at Sterling House once. Edwin had helped him. Harbor House raised him before that, and Dr. Kessler trained him. He was not self-made in the ridiculous way lonely men love to boast about. After burning every bridge behind them, but help is not authorship, gratitude is not a deed transfer. He lifted the mic. I lived at Sterling House under a formal placement. He declared, I returned the key, I returned the household account card, I paid for my move with wages, a buyback refund, and aid from Briar Coast. Dr. Kessler supervised my training. Harbor House shaped my memory of safety. None of that makes my work grants, and none of it makes my future Sterling property. His voice stayed even until that last sentence. When it started to shake, he let it, and if help only counts when it owns the person helped, then it was never help. He finished. The applause was not as loud as the award applause. It was better, sounding like breathing room. Minutes later, the showcase result became official. Open door 1. National Field, the Harbor House fundraiser tied to the entry reopened. And before the closing reception even started, it had already passed its original goal. The director sent him a quick message: no resident images, the terms. Stand proud of you. He stared at that text longer than at the award, but Grant was not going to lose quietly. His scheduled expose published. Before he left the venue, selective support records, cropped house photos, old images of him entering Sterling House after the rescue, stripped of the part where he had reached Audrey first. The piece called him manufactured, polished, funded and promoted by Sterling generosity. It asked whether the public had mistaken a family project for independent genius, and it was clever. Because it did not need to invent everything, it just arranged the truth until it felt like a trap. By midnight, that fake origin story was everywhere Grant could push it. By morning, Harbor House was receiving hostile messages from people who thought they were defending honesty by harassing innocent kids who had absolutely nothing to do with him. Winning should have been the end of Grant's reach. Instead, it showed him exactly which story still had to be corrected. You would think winning would end it, but instead he woke up to a viral expose. It claimed the Sterling family manufactured his entire life. By the time Galloway pulled him back to Fairmont, the story had hardened into the kind of lie people loved because it used real pieces, Sterling House photos, support records, a younger version of him walking through a rich family's door. After a rescue, the Post made it seem like Edwin descended from the clouds and assembled him by committee. He went to Harbor House before going anywhere near Sterling House. The director met him in the front office with the tired calm of a woman who had spent years stopping adult problems from splashing onto children. She had already moved resident activities away from the front entrance. She had already told staff not to argue online. She had already done the practical things while he was still staring at his name becoming public property again. You do not have to answer all of it, she said. Then a resident came in holding a flyer that had been taped to the door, which the director quickly took before he could read every word. Still, he saw enough. Charity fraud. A Sterling puppet, a fake genius, a scam. The resident looked confused, not yet wounded, and that somehow made it feel much worse. Children should never have to learn that adults can turn their home into common section ammunition. Before breakfast, his anger grew incredibly quiet. He had to answer the part that reached their door. The director shook her head, saying she wanted him protected. Too, he understood, staring at the folded paper in her hand, but quiet protection leaves the lie standing where the kids can see it. That was when Edwin called. His solution was measured, immediate, and almost too plain. The Sterling Foundation could release a formal correction. He could provide protection. Round Harbor House entrances during Galloway, he could state that Grant's piece had omitted material facts and let the grown adults take the heat away from the center. Part of him wanted to say yes to all of it and disappear for 3 days. That part had excellent survival instincts and terrible narrative timing. Accept the protection for Harbor House, he told Edwin. Keep resident names out of it. Keep cameras away and skip the donor parade. Edwin agreed, but the correction could not be quiet. He studied the young man through the screen, asking what he was asking for. Talk about a massive gamble, the gala stage. A heavy silence followed. Edwin knew the risk. A quiet statement could patch a leak. A live gala correction could burn the whole story down or hand Grant a cleaner frame, an ungrateful boy attacking benefactors at their own event. It was the kind of no-win room Grant loved building, which meant he wanted it where everyone could see the exits. Edwin warned he would be speaking to an expectant and grateful crowd. Good, he replied. Then they can hear what gratitude is. Not. They spent the next day making the proof smaller, which was somehow harder than finding it. Darius arrived with graduation footage, the Briar Coast acceptance confirmation, the Juniper Cup work record, the travel receipt, and enough market video to make a patient person consider violence. Dr. Kessler brought dated originals, sealed samples, and the offended posture she reserved for anyone who thought a file folder could substitute for authorship. Darius spread everything across a table and said no audience has ever survived spreadsheet with feelings. He replied they would not give them one, though the temptation was real. When someone is called manufactured, they want to produce every receipt, every night shift, every private humiliation, every single doorway they walked through without applause. They want to bury the accusation under proof until no one can see their shame moving underneath it. But too much proof becomes fog, so they chose only what answered ownership. By the end, the pile had one job: prove the route was his. The work was dated, the host placement Carried no debt and Grant's current theft had receipts. Enough spine not. Enough fog. Then Edwin placed the old rescue file on the table. No one touched it. At first, that file was the hardest object in the room because it did two things at once. It corrected the lie that Edwin had simply found and built him. It also brushed against Audrey's teenage terror, and he refused to turn that into a stage prop just because Grant had worse manners than a broken. Audrey stood right beside Edwin when he opened the file, noting how the expose called her grandfather his rescuer. Her voice was steady, controlled but not cold. She called it false. He met her eyes, agreeing to state it plainly. Audrey swallowed once. He had reached her first before the placement took place. Though her memories were fragmented, the records were clear. Edwin silently nodded. He confirmed he could verify both the hosting arrangement and their final release. He made it clear they owed nothing. Audrey folded her hands tightly. She promised that if she spoke, she would speak only for herself. His feelings and his choices were his alone, which meant everything to him. Once Edwin and Dr. Kessler left to organize their upcoming public statements, Audrey stayed behind, quietly holding out a small envelope he recognized instantly. Some objects stay with you. They keep their shape inside your chest. The Sterling House key lay in her hand, the exact same key he left on the entry table. It was a key that once felt like shelter, then obligation, and finally a hook under his skin. Audrey confessed she kept it. First out of anger, then thinking he might need it, and finally to believe. The door still existed once she became someone who deserved to offer it. That was dangerously honest. She placed the key on the table between them. Keeping it just out of his reach, she said she was not calling it home, nor asking him to use it as proof that things between them were suddenly fixed. She was simply offering a choice she should have understood the first time. He stared at the key. In the past, he would have accepted it, just to avoid conflict, while his angrier, younger self would have spat on it. Rejecting kindness felt like surrender back then, but now he was different. He wanted to be someone much harder to buy off. So he left the key sitting on the table, quietly thanking her for making it a choice. His answer was a firm no. Audrey nodded, letting the sudden hurt wash over her. She promised to keep the entire matter out of her upcoming public speech. He replied that the key still mattered, just not as a real invitation. Her eyes locked onto his, bringing back that classic familiar focus of hers. It was like a quiet room lit by a single, glowing candle. Honestly, who can blame him for still noticing after all they went through? Refusing to let this end in artificial romantic closure, he spoke the truth. He confessed that he still had feelings for her, speaking completely honestly. Audrey went completely still. His voice was plain, empty of any defensive humor. He admitted he still remembered building his entire identity around loving her. He remembered exactly what it felt like to completely lose himself in it. Now he feared that moving too quickly would just pull them back into that orbit. Audrey pressed her lips together, quietly admitting that she wanted some hope. His chest ached. He knew he had no right to demand an answer tonight. The relief was sharp, feeling almost like grief, as he agreed she did not. Audrey glanced at the key, then back at him, promising to speak only for herself. For once, the space between them remained intact as they chose not to cross it. An hour before the gala program began, Grant publicly issued his invitation. He did it publicly because a private trap was simply just a trap. It was a public trap. Grant's message praised the Sterling Foundation for uplifting promising young people, inviting Noah to appear during the gala segment as an inspiring success story. Grant framed the offer beautifully. Refusing would make Noah look ungrateful, but accepting meant walking right into the role written for him, a rescued boy, polished product, grateful proof. Darius read it and whispered. He hated when villains understood event programming. Noah replied that Grant was exceptionally good at setting these traps. Dr. Kessler looked at the proof stack, saying he could still decline. Noah thought of the flyer at Harbor House, folded away so quickly. He remembered the resident's confused face, the graduation mic, and his old habit of letting others introduce him because correcting them felt rude. No, Noah said he would accept. The gala glittered with expensive fake generosity. Edwin's people had already positioned all the video clips. Darius held the current evidence, while Dr. Kessler kept the dated originals. Audrey had the key and her own ready words. Harbor House director waited offstage, keeping residents away from the spectacle. Grant introduced Noah with a smile far too bright to be genuine. He welcomed Noah Voss as a powerful example of support and guidance. This trap arrived polished into a compliment. Noah walked onto the stage. The room applauded the perfect, fabricated version of him Grant had built. Edwin stood nearby, jaw tight. Audrey did not move toward the microphone. Darius watched the screens while Dr. Kessler held her folder, ready to demolish any misinformation with proper, solid documentation. Noah took the microphone from Grant. He looked at the audience. Grant had carefully arranged around that lie, ready to correct them. It is a huge turning point. Grant invited Noah as a charity success story, but Noah took the mic to correct the first sentence. He was helped, Noah told them. He was not created. The applause thinned into a tense, expensive room silence as they realized cameras were watching. Grant kept smiling, but his expression faltered. Noah had spent too many years letting other people choose his narrative because correcting them felt ungrateful. Tonight, he chose his words. Noah entered Sterling House after a documented rescue event involving Audrey. He spoke clearly. The only part that belongs on stage is this. He reached her first. Edwin's family only got involved after that through a formal host placement coordinated with Harbor House. Noah refused to turn Audrey's private trauma into a gala attraction. Grant leaned toward his microphone, calling this statement convenient. Noah snapped back. That convenience was simply cutting her trauma out of his post. The room gasped in collective shock. Edwin stepped up to the side microphone, holding the closed rescue file firmly in his hand. He held it with quiet dignity and confirmed Noah's statement. Edwin clarified that the host placement came after that initial event. He only offered educational and housing support. He did not adopt him, nor did he purchase Noah's service, college attendance, or future work or family loyalty. The written release Noah signed before Edwin left said the same thing. Hearing it in Edwin's voice did something strange to Noah's chest. Not because he needed Edwin to free him. He already had, not because the room had authority over his life. It did not, but because shame hates witnesses, and that sentence dragged his own into clean light. Noah raised his hand before Grant could slide another slick compliment around his neck. I am grateful for help, Noah said. I am not grateful for the lie that help makes a person transferable. Darius brought up the first clip. He did not run Noah's whole life on screen. No childhood montage, no sad music, no sentimental poverty reel designed to make donors feel holy for having deep pockets. He showed the backbone, the screen moved quickly. Ridgeview High School, his Briar Coast announcement, his own portal confirmation, the wage and travel trail, the buyback refund, Edwin's release letter, and Dr. Kessler's dated originals. Noah heard the room change as the sequence did its quiet work. Grant's rescue story turned back into choices, signatures, paychecks, and work that predated Grant's need to own it. Grant said, a touching selection from the man who built an expose out of cropped house photos. Noah retorted, I respect the commitment to irony. It is wearing formal wear tonight. Darius coughed once into his fist. Dr. Kessler did not smile, which meant she enjoyed it professionally. Grant's expression sharpened. You are still asking this room to believe hurt feelings are evidence? No, Noah answered. I am asking them to stop confusing evidence with volume. Darius moved to the current packet. This time the screen showed the wrong profile capture, the market footage of Grant's production assistant moving Noah's loose work card, the youth preview reflection with the switched case, and the original inner seal. Then the assistant's direct statement played. Her voice was small, careful, and more damaging than any speech Noah could have made because she did not decorate anything. She named the order, the prepared headline file, and the threat that she would take the blame if the switch surfaced. Then Grant's own voice note filled the room again. Use the identical case. The first cough gives us the headline. The silence after that was no longer expensive. It was ugly. Grant stepped forward. You set a trap. With a harmless, incomplete notebook, Noah said, that only embarrasses someone who steals it. Dr. Kessler took the microphone when he yielded it. The decoy contained no unsafe formula and no finished work. Noah's real records remained dated, sealed, and supervised. Grant's entry copied a flaw that had no purpose except to expose theft. Grant looked toward the side of the stage, searching for a friendly face, a camera angle, a donor, a door. Noah recognized the motion because he had spent his whole first life looking for exits after someone else had already written the room. For once, Grant was the one standing inside the frame he built. Audrey, Grant said, turning his voice gentle enough to Poison tea, tell them the truth. You encourage the partnership. You let the public believe there was a connection. Now that Noah has attention, everyone wants to pretend he was alone. Audrey did not move until Noah turned to her and held the microphone out. That mattered. She took it because he yielded it, not because Grant demanded it, and not because the room wanted a romantic scene. Gift-wrapped for them, her posture was perfect, but her hands were not. She stated, I did not encourage a partnership with Grant. There was absolutely no engagement, no romance, no business agreement, no sponsor consent, and no permission to use my image or my family role. Grant tried to interrupt, but Audrey did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She simply asserted, I am not finished. The room obeyed her in a way it had never obeyed him at 18, and his old self would have hated that. He held the microphone stand and watched her use that power to give something back. At graduation, at the Juniper Cup, and in every room where she treated support like a quiet claim, Noah had already heard the private version from her. She said, tonight I am saying it where the story was being sold. I mistook his care for access. I let my family's help become pressure. I let my regret reach for control before I learned to stop reaching. Her breath caught once. No joke belonged near that sound. That was my conduct, she said. Grant did not invent it. My grandfather did not owe me someone else's future. Mine, regret, gives me no claim on Noah, and I am asking for no answer from him tonight. You can feel the weight lifting off him. Still, that apology did not erase the 6 years in his head. It did not make the Juniper Cup insult adorable character development. It did not turn the key back into a home. What it did was smaller and harder. It stopped billing him for her regret. Edwin took the microphone next, and the room remembered that money had consequences. When it decided to have a spine, effective tonight, he announced, the Sterling Foundation is ending every active relationship with Grant Roars. Operation. The current evidence will be provided to the relevant university. Event sponsor and review channels. Audrey's image and the Sterling Foundation will not be used to endorse him. Grant laughed once. It sounded rehearsed and hollow. He scoffed, this is panic. You are all letting a charity case with a good stage trick dictate institutional policy. Event staff reached him before he could take another microphone. They did not tackle him. That would have been dramatic, and Grant loved drama when he could edit it. They simply removed the microphone from his hand, stepped between him and the stage line, and made his exit boring enough to be fatal. At last, his camera angle had no job left. The room did not explode. Real consequences rarely arrive with the correct soundtrack. Some guests whispered, some checked their phones. Few institutional representatives left their seats with faces that suggested urgent meetings and expensive apologies. Later, verified notices confirmed sponsor withdrawals and continuing reviews. Not a conviction, not cosmic justice with confetti. That was enough to make him look smaller than any insult he could have invented, but he refused to let Grant on the last image. He turned toward the side of the stage. The Harbor House director stepped up from the wings, not from a resident backdrop, not beside a slideshow of children's faces, not under any lighting that confused privacy with inspiration. She took the microphone from him and gave him the look she used when he was about to overhelp and call it virtue. The center's terms are simple, she said. Resident names and images stay private. Attention does not buy tour. Gifts come without strings. The funds attached to Open Door go through Harbor House control, and the children do not become anyone's proof of kindness. He nodded. Those terms stand. Then he announced what really mattered to him. Room's approval. Open Door would continue as a benefit collection under Harbor House control. Money, participation, wording, images, and timing belonged to the center's rules. If that made it less glamorous, then glamour could go find a hobby. He also announced his own small, completely independent studio in Port Lark, separate from the Sterling Foundation, separate from Kessler's Sensory Lab, with one limited collaboration with Dr. Kessler's lab. And his name on the lease. Dr. Kessler took the microphone for exactly one sentence. Collaboration is not ownership, she said. He almost laughed. Because of course that was the sentence she chose. Dr. Kessler could easily strip a philosophy down to its load-bearing beam and make it sound like she was correcting a mislabeled cabinet. The applause came. Then he let himself hear it, but he did not lean his life against it. After the program, Audrey found him near the service hallway, where the gala music sounded expensive and useless. Through the wall, she stopped 3 steps away, not 2, not close enough to make history take its stupid little victory lap. What comes next? She asked. His old self would have answered before she even finished. His angry self would have punished her for asking, but the self he was trying to become took one breath and told the truth. Nothing automatic, he said. The key stays. Returned, we do not get a public label. Tonight going well does not mean a reunion. Audrey gave a single nod even though it hurt. That much was visible. He did not need to guess the rest. If 6 months from now your conduct still matches what you said tonight, he said, I will consider one private coffee. It stays. Off camera, away from family pressure, without countdown texts and without treating patience like a performance. Audrey's eyes shone, but her voice stayed steady. 6 months, no bargaining, no answer owed, and do it for you, he said, not as a way back to me. For a second, the history between them stood there holding every wrong version of home he had ever wanted. Then Audrey said she understood. He believed that she understood those words. He did not pretend that understanding was transformation. He had made that mistake before. Some lessons do not need an encore. The 8 months after the gala were quieter than the climax, which is rude of life but very on brand. Grant did not vanish into a dramatic pit. He lost the sterling foundation connection that had given his charity framing weight. Verified notices confirmed sponsor withdrawals and ongoing reviews tied to the showcase and university channels. The production assistant's statements stayed where they could protect her more than a public spectacle ever would. His name still surfaced, sometimes usually attached to denials that sounded less like confidence and more like a man trying to negotiate. Harbor House stayed under the director's control. Her warm authority could humble a boardroom and a martyr in the same afternoon. Open Door kept selling under the center's terms. The updates he received were practical, supplies covered, program materials funded, privacy intact, resident faces protected, tragedy kept out of the sales pitch. Children never turned into proof that adults had finally located decency. Darius sent him an invoice for the gala production work, complete with a line item labeled emotional damage discount. He paid it. Growth is beautiful, but so is compensating friends before they turn into unpaid infrastructure with better jokes. Dr. Kessler stayed exactly where she belonged, as a mentor, collaborator, critic, and the occasional destroyer of inflated language. When she visited his studio, she inspected his shelves, his ventilation, his records, and his habit of apologizing to furniture whenever he bumped into it. Small, she remarked, looking round. She called it the polite version of tiny, or rather, small enough to remain honest. He kept that comment. Audrey sent no countdown messages and asked Edwin for 0 updates on him, never appearing with a camera, a donation plaque, or the Sterling house key, pretending to be some grand final boss. The Harbor House director told him that Audrey followed center rules, did ordinary work, and left when asked, accepting privacy as part of the job. That did not guarantee forever, but it mattered anyway. After the 6-month mark, he met Audrey for coffee at a quiet table with no public label attached. She paid for her own drink and he paid for his. They talked about Harbor House, school, work, and the kind of apology that keeps moving long after the speech is over. She never asked whether he loved her, and he did not pretend he had stopped. The difference was love no longer got to hold the steering wheel with both hands. When the coffee ended, Audrey thanked him for coming, and he thanked her for not making it a test. Then he left first, and nobody collapsed into symbolism. It was very mature. Honestly, quite inconvenient for anyone hoping for a dramatic rain confession. 8 months after the gala, he unlocked his studio before sunrise. The room smelled like cotton, cedar, citrus, paper, and clean paint. Not destiny, but chosen work. The kind that waited for his hands without demanding his entire life as rent. He thought about Sterling House and the key he had refused. He thought about Harbor House and the director's rules. He thought about Open Door, the scent that had won because it understood something he had learned the hard way. A door was not proof that he belonged to someone, but proof that he could decide whether to enter, so he stepped inside first.